All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of the Transportation Committee. And before we proceed, I'd like to do a quick roll call to remind everyone we need at least 6 members present to maintain quorum. So first of all, we will do roll call. Kelly, if you don't mind doing roll call.
Councillor Lula.
Je suis présent.
Councillor Dudas.
I'm here.
Councillor El Shantiri.
Present.
Councillor Deans.
I'm here.
Councillor Fleury.
Bonjour.
Councillor Menard.
Hello.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Vice Chair Leeper.
Good morning.
And Chair. You have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thanks so much, Kelly. So as noted, the agenda was distributed, and if anyone's participating in this meeting electronically via Zoom, instructions for members of the public wishing to submit comments and participate as a delegation of the meeting were included within the agenda. Those who do not need to participate in the meeting can also still watch this live stream via the city's YouTube channel. For those that are participating in the meeting, please keep your microphones muted until you're called on to speak. I'll provide the committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment in due course. Committee members will be called on first, followed by other members of council that have joined the meeting. At any point, if you wish to speak, please use the raise hand feature within Zoom. The committee coordinator and I will be watching for those hands. The usual 5 minutes do apply. First of all, we have no regrets. Any declarations of interest? Seeing none. Confirmation of minutes. Minutes 12, November 2nd, 2020. Are those confirmed?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. And minutes 13, November 16th, 2020 special meeting. Are those also carried?
Carried.
Great, thank you. I'll just go to the agenda clearing first. First, we do have item number 1, the 2021 draft operating and capital budget. We do have a technical amendment, and I'll ask Vice Chair Leeper if he can please read that. We will be holding this item because we do have 3 delegations to speak today. Vice Chair Leeper.
Thanks. I'll just ask Kelly to put that on screen. Thank you. Technical amendment, whereas on November 4th, 2020, Council received and tabled the 2021 draft capital and operating budget and associated committee budget books, and whereas a revised Transportation Committee draft 2021 budget document was published with the committee agenda, including corrections to pages 34 and 77 of the full budget book, as outlined in the table attached to this motion, and whereas subsequent to the publication of the Transportation Committee agenda, an additional correction was identified requiring the map on page 108 of the full budget book to be replaced with the attached revised map. Therefore, be it resolved that the Transportation Committee receive and consider the revised Transportation Committee draft 2021 budget document, including the revised map for capital project 903163 Bank Street, Leitrim Road to Dun Skipper Drive on page 108. And we'll take a look at that map.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Vice Chair. So we'll definitely be holding that item, coming back to it. Item number 2 is the always stop control of the Canadian Shield Avenue and Great Lakes Avenue, intersection of the Canadian Shield Avenue and Maritime Way. Well, sounds really nice. In Canada North. We have no presentations, no delegations, and no correspondence received on this one. Before I go ahead, I'm just quickly looking to staff. Are we okay to proceed with this? Is there anything that would create an issue by approving this stop control?
Hi, Chair. We have no concerns with this.
Wonderful. So I'm looking to committee on this specific one.
Carried.
Carried.
Okay, thank you. You saved me some time in reading. Next up, item number 3, acquisition of part of 300 Wiggins Private from the community housing for installation of intersection always stop control. This one here, there's no presentations, no delegations, no correspondence received. I am looking to staff, and I don't know who it would be. Do we have any concerns with this specific always? Well, it looks like we're acquiring land, so it might be a little bit different. Who on staff would like to provide comment?
Chair, it's John here. There's a piece that fits in my portfolio, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Willis to comment also. We've been trying to figure out a solution for the counselor. This one's tricky in that staff can't support it on a couple of fronts. The first is, you're dealing with private property, so it's a challenge. It's a very, very far stretch for us, and it doesn't meet the warrants on top of that. But equally important, and I'll ask Mr. Willis to talk about on the proposed funding source.
So Chair, just as Mr. Manconi indicated, there are concerns on a technical basis, which I'll let Transportation Services talk to. But on the issue of the source of funding in this instance, although it's not a small amount of money, the recommendation in the report is to draw it from an existing capital project, which is normally we would address these issues in capital close, or we'd address it through the main budgeting process. This is is a different request and not what we normally deal with. And the concern is, to be fair, although it's not a lot of money, it's not easy for us to accommodate if all councillors start rating capital budgets for minor traffic intersection improvements, because we don't believe that's the way council's capital budgeting process was intended to operate.
Okay, well, so I'll look to the councillor that's proposed the motion. Did you want to go offline and work on this and see what other sources or possibilities exist? Because I think this would create a rippling precedent where I've run into this exact same situation with Costco, where they wanted some traffic controls paid for by the city, and that's not our current process. So Matt, I'm just looking at you. Did you want to go talk offline with Steve?
No, I've done a lot of discussions with staff. I'd love to explain to committee and
okay, fair. So you'll let it stand. Hopefully, well, that's up to you. But we'll let it stand. We'll let it be on the agenda. And we have
since staff spoke, is the item not in front of us, Mr. Chair?
It is not. This is agenda clearing, and I always like to ask staff if they're good with it before we allow members of committee to go ahead and approve something that might not be recommended by staff. So at this point, now this item is added to the agenda, and we'll go back to item number 1, and certainly you'll have a due course and time to be able to debate and basically sell to your committee members why you want that to happen. So we're going back to item number 1, the draft, the 2021 draft operating capital budget. We do have a presentation, and I'll turn the floor over to staff at this point. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Kelly, are you putting the presentation up? Great, thank you. Next slide, please. So good morning, Chair and members of the Transportation Committee. My name is Lila Gibbons, and I'm the Director of Roads and Parking Services. I'm pleased to be here with you today to deliver the draft 2021 budget. First, I'd like to introduce my colleagues who will be presenting with me today. We have Isabel Jasmine, the Deputy City Treasurer, who's here on behalf of Finance. We have Jan St. Louis, Director of Fleet Services, and he's representing Innovative Client Service Department. Vivi Chi, who's the Director of Transportation Planning, and Phil Landry, Director of Traffic Services, who are both representing Transportation Services. And finally, we have Karina Duclos, who's the Acting Director of Infrastructure Services, who's representing Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development. Next slide, please. So the focus of today's presentation is to review the operating and capital budgets from Public Works and Environmental Services, Transportation Services, Innovative Client Services, and Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development. I'll now pass it over to Isabel to go through the operating and capital budgets. Isabel?
Thank you, Leila. So next slide. The operating budgets of 3 departments are included in this committee's budget. Public Works and Environmental Services includes the GM and Business Support Services, Road Services, which includes road and winter maintenance, and Parking Services. This department will see a net increase of 3.049 million, which is roughly a 2% increase in expenditures, with parking expenditures fully offset by parking revenues. Transportation services includes traffic services and transportation planning. The net increase of 6.8 million for this department is primarily due to the additional spending on safety and speed enforcement funded by the new cameras. The net increase to fleet services is 85,000. The overall increase in expenditures is 1.6% or 1.36 million, most of which is recovered from the various operating departments. Next slide. The 2021 draft capital budget includes 23.5 million for fleet services, 100% of which is for renewal. The integrated roads, water, and wastewater draft capital budget for 2021 is 142.9 million, which is also 100% renewal of assets. Transit services includes 760,000 for renewal, almost 30 million for growth. And finally, the transportation services draft capital budget is 139 million, 38.6% of which is renewal, 4.4% is for service enhancements, and 57% for growth. Next slide. This slide provides an overview of the funding sources for the capital budget before you today. A significant portion comes from what we call reserves, but is technically cash. We contribute to reserves from the operating budget each year, and it is these funds that are used to fund much of the capital budget. In this capital budget, 54.3% would be funded with cash that has been contributed to reserves, 25.3% from development charges, which are used to fund growth projects per the development charge background study, and the remaining 20.4% would be funded by debt. Each year, we limit our debt funding to what is affordable per the long-range financial plan, and within Council's approved debt limit of 7.5% of debt servicing as a percentage of own source revenue for tax-supported services. I will, and the draft 2021 budget brings that percentage to 4.5%. I will now pass it back to Leila Gibbons for the next slide.
All right, thank you, Isabel. So the focus, so overall, the proposed operating budget for road services will be increasing by $2.8 million. The key highlights are $1.2 million in compensation adjustments for potential 2021 cost of living increments and benefit adjustments, $1.24 million in inflationary increases to contracted services, materials, supply, and fleet, and $620,000 in increase in fleet costs. So looking back to the 2020 budget process, and a big thank you to this committee and council for their support, we were provided with a growth increase to our operating budget that adequately funded our winter operations, and we are tracking to be on budget by end of year. To carry forward with that momentum, we are continuing with the improvements to our winter operations that came as a result of our service delivery review that we conducted in 2019. These improvements included increased communication with councillors and residents, changing our boundaries to an urban, suburban, and rural model. We moved away from a one-size-fits-all approach and gave our supervisors the authority to make the best decisions on the conditions that they saw in their communities. And we moved to having a 24/7 coverage on our sidewalks when needed. As you're all aware, we are also in the process of reviewing our winter maintenance quality standards. And over the next few months, there will be many opportunities for councillors and residents and our special interest groups to provide feedback through the consultation process. Now we'll move to parking services with a proposed overall increase to the operating budget in the amount of $89,000. Some of the key highlights here include $200,000 increase in security guard costs, $200,000 increase for staffing resources to support the Precise Link contract changes that were approved by council this October. And for 2021, there will be a reduction in the contribution to the Parking Reserve Fund, which can be mainly attributed to reduced parking revenues due to COVID-19. So I'll now pass the presentation over to Phil to share the budget highlights for transportation services. Phil?
Thanks, Lila. So for traffic services, we're spending $1.25 million for the automated speed enforcement program. That's for the operations of the cameras. $500,000 for 10 new red light camera locations, $125,000 for the adult crossing guard program for 10 new locations. We're also asking for $100,000 in staffing resources to support traffic management needs as a result of the film industry, which was a report that was approved earlier this year. $1.5 million in enhanced pavement marking materials as approved by council. This was a report in 2019, and we are in the process of purchasing the additional truck that will allow us to apply this enhanced paint, and that should be in operations next spring. We also have a savings of $1.5 million in terms of the LET retrofit program that's been going on for the last 4 or 5 years. In terms of the net overall increase to budget adjustments, that was $650,000. Next slide, please. In terms of the capital highlights, we have $4 million in funding for the delivery of the Road Safety Action Plan. So we will bring forward a report in March that will talk about the actual items that this money will be funding, and it'll also provide an overview of what occurred in 2020. We have just over $2.4 million in the new traffic control signal device program, or just over $1 million for the safety improvement program, $614,000 for the audible and pedestrian countdown signal program. Next slide, please. $430,000 for Safe Roads Ottawa, and that's a lot of the awareness programming that we provide. $389,000 for the pedestrian safety evaluation program, which is looking at one intersection to improve and enhance pedestrian safety at that location. $107,000 for the cycling safety improvement program, which looks at minor improvements at 10 locations. We have just over $500,000 for the pedestrian crossover program, and of course the $50,000 per ward in the ward-led temporary traffic calming measures. So at this point, I'll pass it on to Vivi to talk about her service area.
Thank you, Phil. The only change to the transportation planning service area's net operating budget is the annual cost of living adjustment and the amount of an additional $110,000. The total 2021 net operating requirement for our service area is $4.49 million. We have full-time FTEs of 36. We do have some temporary positions in the active transportation program, and they're funded through the capital programs. These temporary positions help with the workload of the cycling program and to help with the delivery of the PTIF projects and upcoming projects that could arise from the Investing in Canada infrastructure program. Next slide, please. So for our capital program, we continue to implement the growth projects that Council has approved and in accordance with the TMP's affordable plan. These road growth projects are 95% funded through development charges. For 2021, with the addition of $9.7 million, the Strandherd widening project will be fully funded for construction. This project includes a rail grade separation with Via Rail and cycle tracks and sidewalks. It's an example of a complete street in the suburbs. $18.9 million will be allocated to Bank Street in the South End for detailed design, some utility relocations, and property acquisitions for the segment from Leitrim to Dunskipper. This road widening also includes cycling and sidewalk facilities. In Canada, $844,000 of new funding is being requested to design the underpass at Terry Fox, connecting Earl Grey Drive to Didsbury Road to serve the Canada Centrum shopping complex. $7.4 million will fund the detailed design of the widening of the Airport Parkway from Brookfield to Hunt Club. This project includes a new ramp and roundabout at Walkley and modifications to the west side of Walkley Road with cycling facilities. A MUP is also included along the Parkway corridor. Better access to the Airport Parkway will address the cut-through traffic issues for the neighborhood of Riverside Park and serve communities to the south. Next slide, please. $30 million will be dedicated towards transit network improvements through various programs that promote transit priority, park and ride facilities, corridor protections, and EA studies. Active transportation will receive nearly $13 million to continue with the planning, design, and building of the cycling facilities and sidewalks as per the master plans. Nearly $16 million will be used for improving intersections and network modifications related to growth. These two programs receive 100% and 83% DC funding respectively. And the neighborhood traffic calming program will receive $2 million to continue with the planning, design, and construction of permanent traffic calming measures on local streets and collectors. Thank you. Now I'll turn it over to Innovative Client Services, Jan St. Louis.
Thank you. The portion of the ICS budget that relates to this committee is the fleet services budget, and this is what I'm going to go over for the next couple of minutes. Pour débuter, si on regarde l'ensemble du budget de fonctionnement,
so if we look at the function of the budget, we can see that we have an increase of $1,300,000 and it could be divided into two aspects. The first one, which is 470K for program adjustments in cost of living increments and benefit adjustments. It leaves another 890,000 for inflationary impact on purchase services, parts, and maintenance, as well as fuel and contribution to capital reserve.
Comme vous savez, on est.
As you know, our operation is net zero. Most of our services are billed to the clients, which means that out of the 1,330,000, so 1.27 will be gotten back. So this gives us an increase of enough of an increase to maintain 85K to maintain services. We can see that for capital highlights, 23 million, for city assets. There's 280K for tools and equipment, and 23 for municipal vehicles and scheduled equipment replacement. Most of the money the 23 million will be for the replacement of vehicles for the municipal fleet. And this will replace 162 vehicles, including the conversion to greener, more ecological methods when they are proven.
We're not asking for any additional funding beyond what's required to maintain our current level of service and the vehicle replacement program. Fleet services will continue to ensure best value for money by ensuring we have the right fleet, the right size to support our city operations. We'll continue to renew the vehicle and equipment based on optimal life cycle calculation, and we'll continue to support the COVID response by buying all necessary protective equipment and other supply required by the corporation through this event. I will now pass it on to Karina for the PIDE update.
Merci, Ian. The City of Ottawa maintains nearly 50 billion in existing infrastructure assets. All of Ottawa's infrastructure are safe. We apply a risk-based approach and ensure that priority is given to critical infrastructure. With roads remaining a high priority for Ottawa residents, the city is committed to maintaining roads based on industry standards. To manage the extensive road network, we apply recognized industry practices and are always looking at ways to improve how roads are built and renewed. Here are some highlights from the 2021 draft capital budget. 45 million for road rehabilitation, including geotechnical work, guide rails, rural road upgrades, and preservation treatments, including 2.4 million, which is under the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee authority. The City Road Rehabilitation Program rehabilitates and improves the driving surfaces of Ottawa roadways. Localized repairs to both curbs and sidewalks, along with accessibility improvements and updates, are also part of the program. 26 million to repair and rehabilitate bridges, bridge culverts, pedestrian overpasses, and retaining walls. 9 million to renew sidewalks and pathway, and this includes 4 million for repayment for the Public Transit Infrastructure Project Program, known as the PTIF funding. 105 million for Integrated Road, Water, and Sewer Reconstruction Program, which is significant investment in road renewal. 28 million out of the 105 million is for the transportation portion. This includes rate-funded projects under the authority of standing committees on environment protection, water, and wastewater management. Some of the projects are, for example, 143 million for Fairbairn Street, Bellwood Avenue, Willier Street, Belmont Avenue, to replace existing water mains and sewers, including a full road reconstruction that will include curbs and sidewalk renewal. 8.23 million to continue the replacement of water mains and sewers on Montreal Road and North River Road to Saint Laurent Boulevard, and to implement raised cycle tracks, wider sidewalks, transit priority measures, buried power lines, and protected intersections, as part of our multi-year $64 million investments to renew Montreal Road and North River Road. $9.5 million to replace sewers and water mains in avenues N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, and U, and to build new sidewalks as part of a $10.75 million investment. And $10.8 million for a full road reconstruction project that includes sidewalks, replacing sanitary and storm sewers on Arc Street, Canterbury Avenue, and Pleasure Street, on a total investment of $12.5 million. Thank you for your attention. This concludes our presentation.
Wonderful, and thank you for that presentation today. First of all, before we go to hands up on the board, we do have a few delegations here today. So first up, no stranger, Kelly, if you can let in Ken Holmes into the room.
I believe he's in the room.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, is my sound is working now?
Your sound is working. We can't see you, Ken, but either way, you're no stranger to this place, even though we're in a Zoom world. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
I think it's better if you don't see me. Could I have the first slide, please?
Great.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Today's budget discussion is certainly timely in light of last week's release of the audit of our facilities management. The Auditor General cautions that deferring maintenance is a short-term solution with long-term impacts. That warning is entirely applicable to the underfunding of our roads maintenance. Underfunding is not a new situation. In 2005, the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee reported that there had been a 15% decrease in the condition of rural roads over the short period 2002 to 5. This deterioration has continued citywide since amalgamation. Second slide, please. Road maintenance and renewal is in bad company in the city. The recent audit report identified almost $490 million in deferred facilities maintenance funding. 10 years ago, Ottawa identified a $300 million shortfall in repairs for social housing, and more than 5 years ago, the On the Move program found it necessary to invest some $340 million in advanced road renewal projects. I estimate that the backlog in necessary road repair work is in the vicinity of $300 million. Next slide, please. Our infrastructure management system identifies good repair as the norm. However, the city reports are advising us that some 75% of our roads are in a condition below that good standard. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This chart illustrates the remaining life of a pavement depending on its condition. Many of our roads are in poor to very poor condition and have few useful years remaining. Once the condition of a road falls below fair, for every dollar that had not been invested in timely maintenance, it is estimated that it'll cost us some $4 to $5 to bring the road back to a satisfactory condition. Next slide. Our roads inventory is valued at more than $13 billion. The Canadian Infrastructure Report Card project recommends funding the maintenance of roads at about 2% of the value of that inventory, and that spending less than 2% will result in deteriorated road conditions over a period of time. This draft budget 2021 underfunds by some $100 million the level of investment in roads maintenance that public infrastructure experts recommend. Next slide. To put the numbers into perspective, the green arrow on the right shows the CIRC recommended minimum funding level. The red arrow on the left shows where the 2021 draft budget puts us. How did we get there? I draw your attention to the gold arrow on the left. This is where the city's first long-range financial plan, 2002, estimated the need for an annual roads maintenance budget of about $156 million in today's dollars. That figure was based on audits of the existing maintenance cost records of the former municipalities. The white arrow on the right shows the average of other Canadian cities. Ottawa's funding level should be measurably higher than the average Canadian city because of our winter weather conditions. Next slide, please. The percentage of our roads inventory that is in the poor category is significant and increasing. The National Capital Region Heavy Construction Association has expressed the consequences as pay me now or pay me later. How do we return our roads to a state of good repair? Next slide, please. It'll likely require an audit of the roads function in order for council to fully appreciate the magnitude of the maintenance problem. We must aim to increase the funding of our roads maintenance and renewal budgets to 2% of the value of our roads inventory. I recommend that staff develop options for a Roads Get Well program that'll eventually give guidance to the long-range financial plan. Several costed options need to consider the sources of funding, and there's no quick fix. Options should consider different timeframes to get out of the hole that we're in, and we're likely considering a horizon of more than a decade. The plan must outline to the taxpayer the intended results, as well as the likely tax consequences. Work must be prioritized and incorporate measured performance targets so council can monitor progress. Next slide, please. In summary, much of our roads inventory is in poor repair, not the state of good repair that we state as the norm. The solution is not with the short-term discussions over the annual budget. The City of Ottawa can only make significant headway in resolving the poor and deteriorating condition of its roads by implementing a comprehensive Roads Get Well program. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and Kelly has a copy of my presentation.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Ken. It's been circulated. We do have 2 questions, actually 3. First on deck is Councillor El Shintiri.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Holm, for your presentation. I think we hear your presentation on a yearly basis, whether in our own war budget or transportation committee. And I don't think any one of us disagree on the shape or the condition of our roads or our facilities. And you're right, we just received the other generous report identified us. The question is going to be, Mr. Holm, where do we find the balance between affordability and what we can do? I asked you the question before, I'm going to ask you again. Do you have any idea where this funding going to come from to be able to meet the long-range financial plan? As I think, as you know, our resident or the older adult, they only receive $2 increase on their paycheck. How much more can they afford to pay? And if we increase taxes to fix our infrastructure, I can assure you we'll have more pressure on social housing and more people would lose their home. So do you have a solution to the problem we have other than other level of government step up and help the city's infrastructure?
Okay, if I had a solution, perhaps I would be the mayor, but I don't have an immediate solution. The solution, of course, depends on the options that the staff can put together. I appreciate that the obvious or the easy solution of increasing the tax rate is not going to be well received by many of the taxpayers. But that's the challenge of council to deal with these very serious options. I gave you some indication of the several hundreds of millions of backlog in infrastructure maintenance in other areas. The the city, through its FedCo, through its long-term financial plan, has got to look at these serious backlogs and start prioritizing. I mean, we obviously can't do everything at once. And that's why I've suggested that we're probably talking about a 10-year window. Part of the solution may be in external funding. Part of the solution may be in tax increases. Part of the solution may be by a very brutal assessment of priorities. In 2004, we went through a very exhaustive process of the Universal Program Review. Part of that review was to try to assure Council that we were sticking to priorities. Perhaps we've got to do some sort of a repeat of that very brutal process. But the solution, as we all recognize, is not easy. If it was easy, we would have done it a decade ago, but it has to be addressed.
Thank you for the advice. I think we all understand it to be addressed. The question is the how. So during all the budget meeting, I haven't heard one resident say, I want less service. So every presentation, every budget meeting, community come up and ask for more bicycle lane, more maintenance, more repair, more flu clinic, more, everything more. And not yet we heard one resident say how we're gonna pay for all this. So I was hoping you can advise us, but while I know you pay a lot of attention to road, and I thank you for that, but obviously you don't have a solution as much as we don't, because we are going with affordability. And Mr. Holm, let me remind you, we become creative too. This year, I made a swamp with another councillor to use my cash in lieu to fix road. They were victim of the flood, and also they were not being paid for the last 30 years. So I used my cash in lieu in order to fix my road. So I'm not sure how much more creative can be other than stand at the corner and Albion and ask for donation for roads. But thank you for every year you come in, and your presentation is what we already know, because we give you those information. So I was hoping for someone would give me a little bit of solution. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Holmes. So we have Vice Chair Leeper with questions.
Thanks. And Ken, thanks for your presentation. I think residents across Ottawa share the frustration with the condition of the roads. The $300, obviously I'm a strong cycling advocate, $300 in automobile maintenance every year for drivers is actually, dangerous conditions for cyclists. We need our roads to be in good repair. In the last term of council, we undertook a pretty comprehensive review that I recall of the state of our roads. And in the last election campaign, everybody around this table heard about that. The reason we're paying a 3% tax increase instead of a 2% tax increase is to accelerate the rate at which we are fixing our roads. When you gave us your prescription for what needs to be done moving forward, forgive me, I'm hard pressed to see what elements are missing from the exercise that we've already undertaken. What more, other than funding at an accelerated rate, the repairs we know we need to make, is there some element of our review of the condition of roads that is still missing? We've done the inventory, we have the plan, we have the costing.
My understanding is that there's an update of the state of the infrastructure report, I believe, coming next year. So that will certainly give us a more recent assessment of the priorities. And hopefully that will be timed well to match the update of the financial long-range plan. But if there's one aspect that I think we continue to ignore, and that is the cost of continuing to do business as normal. We are aware that any significant delay of routine maintenance has a consequence. And the consequence is that it's going to cost you 4 to 5 times in major repair what you could have got away with if you had done the routine and somewhat minor maintenance. So that consequence is extreme. And needs to be built into every factor. It's very easy to say, we can't afford it. But I can provide also an equally easy response that says, you can't not afford you have a penalty of 4 to 5 times what it would cost you to do regular maintenance if you ignore the regular maintenance. So no, I don't have an easy solution. And like I say, if there was an easy solution, council would have implemented it a long time ago. But we're living with the absence of a good solution, a good funded solution for 20 years. And it's going to take us at least 10 years to get out of that. Extra money is certainly a critical part of that solution.
I doubt that anyone around this table disagrees with you. Thank you very much, Mr. Holmes.
Great. Thank you very much. Next up, Councillor Hoobley.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't hear an answer to Councillor Leeper's question there, which was the area I want to go to as well. Is we have an infrastructure plan to get caught up on this. Originally, it was 10 years. As Councillor Leeper said, there was a public consultation of this done by most councillors during the last election. And it was agreed we would add 1% to the tax rate, dedicate it to this infrastructure plan to bring it down to, I think it's now a 6-year plan instead of a 10-year plan. I'm not hearing anything from you disputing that plan, or on the same hand, you're not recognizing that we already have a plan in place, something that the public is accepting of. It's, to Councillor El Shantiri's points, it's affordable for residents to do this, to get the work done. So if the 6-year plan isn't going to do what you want done, what is?
Well, the 6-year plan, in my estimation, nowhere near meets the requirement for funds. I refer back to the CIRC charter recommendations, where they advise or recommend that municipalities need to fund their roads infrastructure at 2% of the value of that infrastructure, and to do less makes the situation worse in the long term. Right now, we are investing in budget 2021 approximately 1.2%. So we're being warned or advised by authorities, experts in public transportation, public infrastructure, of which a member of our city staff was a very strong lead. We're being advised that we've got to spend more than 2%. Any of the plans that I've seen do not recommend a funding level anywhere near 2%. So how do we expect that we're going to return to a decent condition of good repair by spending much less than the experts recommend?
The experts may recommend, sir, but as several of my colleagues are trying to point out to you, taxpayers have been very clear to us that they are not willing to go to another point on top of the 1% of the full budget that's already going there. So we're going to have to find a way to make this work. So I'll look to, Mr. Chair, I'll wait for when we can ask questions to staff, and hopefully they can respond to that, because they put a plan before us. It was endorsed by council. It was supposed to get us to where the delegation is suggesting we should be, and with a clear timeline. So I just want to see if they need to update that or whatever. So I'll leave it here and take it back up with staff when you say it's okay to start asking staff.
Great, thanks, Councillor. We'll move on to Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Holmes, for bringing this forward in your presentation. What I wonder is, at what point can we make it so that we're showing that we're, in the long term, trying to save money by making the investment? Is it a one-time infusion that you're saying could happen, and then from then on it would be possible to keep it up? And you're talking about roads, but I'm hoping we're talking also about sidewalks and bike lanes as well, which is equally important.
certainly my focus has been on roads. It's a bit difficult looking at the budget for an outsider to try to parse some of the line items as to how much is directed to roads, how much is directed to culverts, for example, and sidewalks. My focus has been on roads, but I certainly appreciate that there is the requirement for the other aspects like sidewalks and overpasses. In terms of your first question, which I think I've almost forgotten, the way ahead, I think it's critical that taxpayers understand the consequences of not proceeding in a direction, the details of which they would be aware. It's very easy for a taxpayer to say, you know, I don't want my taxes increased. It's also very easy for a counselor, for somebody who says, but I absolutely need it, for the counselor to then say, okay, where are we going to get the money from? Well, most residents do not have a sufficiently global appreciation of the budget to be able to meaningfully suggest where the money should come from. That's a question of council priorities. But if councillors believe that we need to maintain our roads at a state of good repair, and they get into the juggling match, the competition of where does the money come from, it is council and council's set of priorities that determines where that money comes from. If council decides that it is not a priority to maintain the roads, then those people that vote for that must take full responsibility for the consequence of the roads falling apart, and in 5 to 10 years having to spend 4 to 5 times that money to get them into some sort of serviceable condition. But that's not my job, that's not my responsibility. That's why we have a mayor, that's why we have council, that's why we have staff, to put those very brutal options to council to make the appropriate decision at the appropriate time.
I appreciate that. And what I'm looking at is showing people that we're trying to save money in the long term. So if you do put in that infusion of getting things at a good shape, that in the long term you will save money. And I mean, if you have a house, you understand that you put in the investment of what it takes to maintain it. And that's what you're looking at. Are there any good examples out there that you know of cities? You were showing the average of other cities, but are there any good examples of that are doing this?
I'm a bit hard pressed to find a good example. If you like, I will try to put together a short list. I am reminded, however, the last time that the city of Ottawa reported its performance into the Ontario benchmarking initiative project, of the 14 cities that reported into that system, Ottawa stood or sat at number 14. So compared to 14 other of the Canadian larger cities, we were last.
Well, it strikes me that residents do understand their when you explain to them big expenses. For example, I'm having to explain every day of the cost of the LRT. Right now, it's a pain in the neck to people, and they're not happy with it. And I'm talking also about the construction of stage 2, as well as their dissatisfaction with the first. We always are explaining things, but I think there's a common sense approach here, because it bothers me very much, and I think the auditor report was extremely important in terms of what our infrastructure is. It was focusing on buildings, but this idea of any of our infrastructure, including roads, is a concern, and how we budget for it, and how we're actually hurting ourselves in the long run, because it will bite us back, you know. So I'm just looking at, is it a matter of sort of stopping and putting the expenditure in a one-time, well, as you pointed out, over 10 years, that's your suggestion is over 10 years to bring it back up. Is that what you're saying?
Certainly, it's almost an impossible task to solve the backlog in a very short time frame. That's why I suggest 10 years is reasonable, not just for the funding, but also for the ability of staff to plan and manage that amount of construction, construction and repair. So I certainly believe in a phased approach, in an affordable phased approach. But the affordability is determined to the greatest extent by what are the consequences of not improving the situation. And I think that's one of the approaches that needs to be taken with the residents. Like I had said earlier, it's very easy for a taxpayer to say, no, I don't want any more taxes. And in many cases, I can't afford any more taxes, but they've got to appreciate the consequences. Life is not as simple as a homeowner looking at his roof and saying, well, I guess we're not going to buy a new car next year, or I guess we're not going on a vacation because that's the priority. But life is very simple in a house. I don't suggest or propose that life is anywhere near that simple in a city. It is a matter of priorities. It is a matter of consequences. And that's the challenge that the city has got to rise up to meet. And I still don't believe that the current plans to, quote, fix the problems, the current plans are not adequately funded to bring the roads up to anywhere near that state of good repair in a 6-year period. We're talking of at least 10 years. It took us 20 years to get to the bad state that we're in now.
Mr. Holmes, Mr. Holmes,
10 to 20 years to get out.
Mr. Holmes,
Yes.
just being cognizant of time, because we do have other delegations. If you could just answer the question in a more short format, it'd be appreciated. Councillor Kavanaugh, do you have any further questions for Mr. Holmes?
No, I'm quite
Thank you.
satisfied, and I appreciate Mr. Holmes, your responses.
Great. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity. Just beside me here at work at City Hall, these are the notes I took going door to door in the last election. And I have them beside me because I look at them now and then, and I plan over many years how I'm going to get that done. I can't do it all in week one, but they're there because those 30+ pages from my residents, very important, and the priorities are from small to large. So Mr. Holmes' sentiments, Chair, he reminds us about the backlog, and he reminds us it's cheaper to pay for repairs today than tomorrow. I understand that. I also understand we've got housing, climate action, repairs to libraries, public health. This is the job of council, is to prioritize. But Mr. Holmes, my direct question to you is this. In your analysis, are you able to recommend to this committee priority setting in the sense that, is there anything in this budget that we could put a lesser priority on in order to put more resources into roads? So you've identified the problem. One thing that councillors struggle with is, okay, we ask people in the community to help us prioritize. What is less of a priority in this budget that we could put fewer resources to and redirect to roads, in your opinion?
I'm sorry, but in the short time, I can't give a quick answer. To arrive at those priorities, I have to go through the same sort of process that staff and council did to arrive at the results of the Universal Program Review. I mean, it's unfair for me to start picking which ones I personally think are different.
Fair enough. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I just want to highlight that the same challenges that we as councillors go through when we have to prioritize our basket of issues on behalf of our residents. But thank you very much for your presentation.
Great. And yes, and I'll also say thank you, Mr. Holmes. Very well done presentation. At this point, we're going to move along to our next delegation, seeing no further questions, to Angela Keller-Kurzog from CAPACE. And I see Angela there. She's got the good headset going on, so you're no stranger to committee meetings. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning. So I'm speaking on behalf of CAFES, as you've noted, Community Associations for Environmental Sustainability. CAFES was founded in 2010 and is a forum of representatives of community and residents associations to meet, exchange, and engage with the City of Ottawa on environmental issues. Our members include representatives from urban, suburban, and rural communities, currently from 43 different community associations and 6 citizens associations. Our members, as will be no surprise to you, are strongly concerned about climate change, as are you, councillors, as attested by Council's declaration of a climate emergency, and as are thousands of Ottawans who marched in the pre-pandemic 2019 climate march. We have a question regarding the fleet vehicle and equipment plans in budget 2021. Sometimes numbers speak louder than words. And the number 0 is a very powerful number, and it sends a very powerful message. So in budget 2021, we're looking at a $4.6 billion budget overall. Of that, just short of 25 million is proposed to be spent on vehicle fleet renewal and growth, a total of 179 vehicles, ranging from light to heavy, and including one Zamboni ice resurfacer that needs to be replaced. I'm sure Matthew Fleury has noticed that. Of these 179 vehicles on the draft budget 2021 fleet replacement and growth list, 0 are electric. So these 179 vehicles on your shopping list are effectively fossil fuel infrastructure that lock us into a high carbon path and a full life cycle of future emissions. The 0 vehicles on your shopping list are 0 emission vehicles. So it's 2020, and the City of Ottawa has a climate strategy that makes it clear that we must turn a corner onto a low carbon economic development path. However, this 0 that I'm pointing out tells us that we are not turning any corner when it comes to the City of Ottawa's fleet renewal choices. So why is there 0 provisioning for electric vehicles? Surely inside a $25 million envelope, there is some room to maneuver. Electric vehicles are available on the market and with life cycle costing are competitive given lower operating and maintenance costs. Electric trucks, including garbage trucks and paratransport vehicles, are starting to be on the market. And if it will be another year for the market to mature for our specific needs, then why not wait for a year for some of these buys? We understand that we cannot get from 0 to 100 in a flash, and that wouldn't be good management, right? In terms of life cycle and fleet management. But do we really need to be stuck at 0? Like, what is the message there? Like, talk to the hand? It's our hope that this shopping list, this budget 2021 fleet growth and renewal proposal, can be revised by staff upon your direction, that you councillors can start to move the needle even a little. 0, we think, is not the right number. Thank you for your time and attention.
Right down to the final seconds there. We do have 2 questions, and as you know, I'm sure many committee members have noted your questions, and I'm certain they'll ask those staff members questions related to those. We have Councillor Menard followed by Councillor Fleury.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for being here, Angela. I am concerned as well about this in terms of the climate change emergency that we've passed, and that emergency not seeming to match the actions that we're putting in place on multiple fronts in this budget in particular. On your very good delegation, I guess, what other solutions are there? You know, what other innovative options exist in other cities facing the same sort of renewal. Obviously, this is a life cycle replacement. So when we buy these, it's not just buying it for a year. We've got these for 15, 20 years. So what other solutions exist in other cities facing the same situation that you're seeing?
Thanks, Councillor Menard, for the question. First of all, I want to remark that we have worked for I think the past 2 terms of council on having this energy evolution strategy and plan. So it's not like the city of Ottawa has nothing in place and we have to start from scratch and look at what is Vancouver doing, let's copy them. We do have a plan. What we need to start doing though is to make that turn and to implement the plan into action. So I think the question on what could Ottawa be doing, I think we could be looking in some corners that we haven't looked so much. We have never ever in all the years that I've been following the climate discussion talked about HR tools, performance incentives for staff. So if you're a staff member somewhere in the middle of the hierarchy and you're busy working on some project to get something done, then your performance is measured on that track. And for you to turn the corner and start making modification, that requires change management. People are adverse to change. So are there ways to give performance incentives, for example, to staff to make innovations, to start making climate adjustments, to have carbon budgets, perhaps for departments in the city, and different departments obviously are differently carbon intensive. I think the transportation department, there could be a lot of room. We could have fuel reduction targets, again, that would be linked to individual performance management. I know that there has been some good work on idling devices also. And I'm not an engineer, I'm an economist, but we do see an awful lot of service vehicles, as well as, of course, the police vehicles, who always have their engines on, supposedly to run those computers. I'm sure that a little battery installed to keep the computer running could result in a massive reduction in idling. So I think that there definitely is room to do things that are not yet on the discussion plane. And we certainly can't be expecting that climate group to be from their little vantage point doing everything. I think that it takes both leadership from the top, and it's a very horizontal issue, right? It's climate affects the operations of pretty much all departments. And I guess the HR department probably maybe it hasn't affected enough yet. And then I think that could be interesting in terms of helping us to make that turn and to get off this like zero position, which I think it really sends like a very loud message of essentially rejection of change for now.
Thank you very much for your delegation.
Great, thank you, Councillor Menard. Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you, Angela. Thank you for your engagement on this. I agree with you that this issue is horizontal in nature. We have a fleet team. They work within parameters, and they work with what they'll call clients, which are the various departments. And that is the challenge. The fleet team needs to be empowered to make decisions today that offer an ability to continue to provide the services, but at the same time are also front leading. I had a point to share with you because you raised the ice surfacer, and that was a battle that I've undertaken a number of years ago. That because in an arena setting, I think the vehicle is even more challenging because it's indoors and does leave vulnerable ice users and staff so that it be diesel, propane, or others, it does leave some risks. And I will formalize that request to staff afterwards, but I do believe that we're outside of the procurement now, and that the one resurfacer that is being replaced this year will be a pilot electric. So I don't see that as the ultimate solution, but it's a big step in the right direction. So I will be asking staff when the questions come as it relates to that. Maybe my question to you is really, you're an economist. We share the importance. Obviously, council has passed the energy evolution. Can you speak to, we can't turnkey like this procurement, and we can't turnkey like this a full transition to electric. How do you see each budget being a step towards those changes? How do you see that unfold from your perspective?
Well, one of the great things about not being like a single household, but being a whole city is that you have a better capacity to manage over the long term, and you have a capacity to manage for the whole fleet, right? So I think we as a city can get much more optimal kind of solutions than we can for when we're doing planning for an individual household, right? So there's a big advantage there. And one of the things that good forward planning is that we could say, well, in 2-3 years, we're going to have a big order for, I don't know, 50 trucks of this specification. So we can start placing that order now, understanding that these there could be waiting lists for getting that kind of like fleet size order and specifications for our local needs. So that's one thing. It's not just like an instant shopping list that has to be done year by year. I think also there obviously is some kind of a problem, and I would be very happy if you can go back to staff to see whether this shopping list currently can be tuned up, because there are vehicles that are immediately available on the market in terms of electric on the especially the light vehicle side. And there's sites, including for Ottawa from the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa, that have all the metrics at a glance. And I can send you that link if it's not known already by procurement. One last comment about procurement. And I am aware that the Sustainable Procurement Guideline, which dates back from 2013, is under revision, and cafes will actually later this week be undertaking a consultation with Will McDonald. I think that there's a space between what the procurement folks do and what their client demands are. And if a client comes along and says, hey, I'd like to have a Mercedes SUV to help me with my so-and-so job, then procurement can say, well, whoa. We don't allow clients to specify quite that narrowly, and you can't have a souped up luxury car. We need to have things in certain frameworks. So in certain frameworks, if that framework includes metrics for greenhouse gas emissions, then automatically the alternatives and also the life cycle costs, because for the electric vehicles, the maintenance and fuel costs obviously are much lower over the lifetime of the vehicle. So the choice of what are we looking at needs to be also with procurement. It can't just be that the client department can have a wish list and say we're going to replace like for like. Because again, to make those changes, to turn that corner is difficult. Most of us want to resist change when it's proposed to us. That's our first reaction because we know what's tried and true.
Great. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.
Great. Seeing no further questions, we'll move along to the next delegation. Emily Grenier from Ecology Ottawa. Oh, there you are. Hello.
Hi. Thank you for your time.
Great.
I'm only going to take a very brief moment. I'm here on behalf of the Ecology Ottawa team and on behalf of our supporters. I'm here to echo and support Angela Keller-Herzog's delegation. The climate emergency requires changes to the business as usual approach. This includes procurement and fleet purchasing or replacement investment processes. Ottawa must ensure that the city budgets are clear on moving to procuring an entirely electric fleet. As discussed earlier by staff, the current budget suggests to continue purchasing fossil fueled vehicles, and 179 at that. Failure to commit to electric vehicle procurement will result in the failure of achieving the goal of 100% reduction of city emissions by 2040. A clear budget demonstrating that the city is procuring an electric fleet, or even only a part of the fleet for now, will have direct impact on the achievement of the city's climate action targets. I would like to thank city staff for addressing our concerns throughout these past few weeks, as well as Councillors McKenney and Fleury for their work on this topic. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your delegation today. I see no questions, so thank you for coming out to speak today. Now we'll move over into questions to staff. At this point, I'd ask committee members or council members to put their hands up. First, we have Councillor Hubley.
Thank you very much, Chair. We've just heard a couple of delegations talking about what our efforts are to reduce greenhouse gases. Mr. Manconi, can you remind me how many buses we took off the road with LRT alone?
Chair, it was, sorry, Councillor, it was over 100. It was planned 182, but I think we're around 150.
Around 150. Okay, thank you. And you know, we're hearing a delegation suggest that we need to electrify our fleet right now. So put aside the discussion on the buses, because as you well know, and I think the public is aware, we have a pilot project that we're undertaking this year to evaluate whether our routes in our system could be well served by electric buses, or if we have to wait for another generation here. But for the other vehicles that the city has, is it the same concerns with switching over immediately to 100% electrification? Would they be able to serve the needs that the existing fleet does?
So thank you for the question, and I'll ask Yan St. Louis to provide further details. I would like to say that we are committed to greening the fleet. There are a number of initiatives underway, including replacement of vehicles in 2021. So we do have a life cycle replacement plan, and we do replace with green where it meets our operational requirements. And I will ask Monsieur St. Louis to provide further details on this, but I do want to reassure the committee that there will be replacement vehicles for green alternatives in 2021. And the replacement is simply a portion of our greening efforts that we undertake to green the fleet. So for example, we have anti-idling devices on our ambulances. There is not a green alternative that is reliable that meets our operating requirement for ambulance and fire truck and heavy equipment, for example. But we do have anti-idling devices that we put on our ambulances. But I will ask Monsieur St. Louis to provide further information if he will.
Thank you. That is correct. This year's replacement plan has, including growth, 179 vehicles. The majority of those are heavy vehicles, but the ones that are light and we're looking cars, small SUVs, when options are available and proven, we transition them. We convert them automatically. So that is basically invisible when you look at the list of vehicles we're replacing. It's part of our standard. We just convert it. Again, this year is a fairly small replacement plan in comparison to other years. So there's not as many options as they could have been. For example, last year, we converted over 50 vehicles to either hybrid or electric. We've been doing that for years, and we will continue to do that. We're also working at embedding our green fleet plan as part of our normal operation. It's not something that's going away. It's not something that's temporary. It has to be part of our process, and we're working on that. Technology is moving fast, so we need something that's flexible, that we can adapt to technology, that's sustainable over time, and we'll be presenting that plan by the end of Q2 next year.
But you said you evaluate the needs based on what the request is. So if a department comes to you and says they need X number of vehicles, you look at what those vehicles will be required to do before you decide which option's available, right? You're not automatically going to electric in cases where electric may not. I'm thinking, for example, garbage trucks. I don't see you converting to electric garbage trucks in the near future. And it's because the development of the system isn't there yet. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're moving automatically when the technology is proven in a working environment, and meets the client's needs.
Okay, I think that's a very prudent approach. I'm sure taxpayers would appreciate that we do that. Okay, thank you. Now, I'll ask the question and staff can decide who's going to answer this. Early on, we had some comments about the infrastructure master plan, and several of my colleagues pointed out that we had a 10-year plan. We took a unified approach to increasing taxes 1% this term of council, with that 1% dedicated to infrastructure. And if I recall the report correctly, that was bringing the 10-year plan down to like a 6 or 7-year plan in that range. Can staff give us an update on that, please? And feel free to comment on what the delegation had added in there.
So I can talk about the long range financial plan. So what we had done is we had increased how much we're contributing by an additional 2 million from what was in the long range financial plan, which had identified 10 years. So that cut it back to 7 years. So it's actually 7 years that we're going to recover. And I'm trying to recall the gap was $90 million, and now it's down to $50 million annually.
But that was to get us to where the delegation was talking about, was to get more of our roads up above the failing grade, correct?
And if I could just speak to the overall gap, it includes all tax supported services. So it's not just roads, it includes buildings and facilities, roads, right. All the tax infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you as well. That's a good point to make. So speaking specifically to roads, because that's what the delegation was in talking about, can staff confirm that what was originally a 10-year plan got the roads up to where the delegation was suggesting that most municipalities are trying to be?
Sure, I'll answer that question. I think we are, excuse me, we're just going to, we have feedback here. Chair, we certainly are playing catch up. We are putting more resources into the road category, as you appreciate that with the deferrals in 2020 related to our financial mitigation strategies, COVID, that did set us back a little bit, but we are still working towards that, and we are increasing the investments in roads in the long run, as Isabel said. So we're working to deliver more and more on the road replacement and improvement strategy, and a lot of that is still done on a triaged basis of high priorities and the highest volume roads.
So we're keeping an eye on the condition of the roads, like the ones that are failing. You're saying we triage that, and at least that's what I think I'm hearing from you, is that we're doing that on an ongoing basis. So if a road was listed as fair 4 or 5 years ago, if it's failing now, we update that status. Is that correct?
So we still have a priority system so that arterial roads and roads that take heavy bus traffic are our top priority, and they get the first effort into repair into those. And then we work our way down to the rest of the network. We certainly appreciate that there are roads in other parts of the city, particularly local roads, that are in poor condition. We will get to them after we've addressed the higher priority roads. And many of those local roads are also done in the integrated reconstruction projects where we're replacing the underground infrastructure. So that's also another area where a lot of those roads are being addressed as well. So, certainly we'd love to be able to do more, but we are doing what the long-range financial plan allows us to do.
One last question on that, if I may, Mr. Chair. Are we looking, like when we do this exercise to compile this budget that's before us today, has there been any dialogue with the industry to say, you know, look, we're looking at spending $50 million in roads. Is there any opportunity that we can get a better price by doing this kind of volume with them?
So Chair, we in our pavement renewal program, we already do bundle a number of projects in bulk in a series of contracts. They're led on a geographic basis. So all the roads in the south are put in one contract package to try to find the savings. That's the sort of thing we already do. And we have very regular meetings with the National Capital Heavy Construction Association where we talk about strategies on how to stretch our dollars amongst other things. So, you know, I can assure you we're looking for every opportunity we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Willis, and thank you, Chair. That's all my questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor. On to Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Jared. Just a few. First of all, my lack of questioning this morning about MUPs, sidewalks, or roads are only because I've had a number of meetings with staff before today to save some time and to get a lot of questions and answers and data. And I'm going to focus on some of the smaller things, but they're very important in my ward. And I'm going to start with traffic calming. And it's been an issue for me since I took office. And I want to ask staff if the traffic calming unit is fully staffed and able to handle the large volume of requests that 23 wards are generating.
Chair, yes, the permanent traffic calming program resides in my area, and we do have staff that can handle the studies. The issue is about funding to implement the studies' recommendations. But we've seen an increase in the last few years. It used to be some years it was very, very low, but in the last few years we've seen an increase up to $2 million per year to implement the measures. So we are able to keep up. There is the study requests that come in have to be prioritized citywide, and that's why you know, so it's all based on the funding, but we have enough staff to handle the workload.
So each ward gets $50,000 a year, and there's an automatic cut off the top that goes back to the traffic calming team for, I think it's staffing. Is that right? It's about $12,000.
Oh, okay, you're talking about the temporary traffic calming. I think Mr. Landry is here.
Yeah, I can answer that. Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yeah, so we take that cost as to staff the people to go and do the work. The challenge as time goes on is there's more and more of these measures out in the street, especially the flex posts. So it takes a little longer to do that. And so what we do is we reallocate resources from other areas within our science group to focus on that for usually it's the month or so in the spring, and also the couple weeks at the end of the year to focus to get them removed as short as possible time. But we have 2 staff that are dedicated for the rest of the year when the workload is more manageable. So at this point, we feel that we have the adequate staffing. We are always reviewing that, and if there's a requirement to because of the number of measures that are out there that need to be reviewed, we would bring that forward as a pressure in future years.
The 1.2 million that's budgeted for speed enforcement technology, that's the cost. What are the anticipated revenues that those cameras will bring in?
At this point, we're anticipating, I think it's in the revenue side of the budget, $6 million for 2021. Again, this is a pilot. We're sort of learning as we go in terms of the implications and the impacts that the cameras are having on driver behavior. We expect when the first few cameras started in July, we were getting complaints and saying, you know, I got 4 or 5 tickets because I didn't know they were working. Or we would expect that those people, when they start driving down those roads, realize it's there. And studies have shown that the reduction of the number of tickets goes down to about 20 or 30% of the total traffic versus maybe the first few weeks, it's a lot higher. So again, we will bring back a report to committee next summer that will summarize those impacts in terms of financial. It also look at to see have they been effective in reducing speeds, and also looking at in terms of how do we move forward with this program. And there's also the the costs in terms of the court costs and also in the revenue with the additional fines. So we're all looking at that. We're working very closely with Service Ottawa and Finance to get all those costs. So we provide a comprehensive plan, a report next year.
If I wanted to finance a crossing guard out of my office budget, is that possible?
The crossing guard project program is an operational program. So in terms of my understanding, and the clerk's office can confirm, is that wouldn't be possible because it's a year-over-year cost versus like a capital cost, where if it's a one-time thing. We have done in situations where there's construction, we do fund a guard for a year, but it's well known by the community as well as a councillor, this is a temporary fix to address that specific issue.
But I have received this answer in the past. I don't understand that. It's one thing for me to not direct funds like into the next tenure of council, right? I can't allocate those funds to the next councillor, but from, let's just say 2020 to 2021, I'm still the councillor. I'm in control of my 2020 budget, my 2021 budget. I don't understand, and this is a hypothetical question, but the need is there. We have, Chair, intersections where we need crossing guards. They don't need warrants. I'm willing to contribute to the highest priority. I'm not sure why I can't do that.
Well, in terms, it would be a temporary measure. I think the adult crossing guard program, the expectation is once a guard is out there, especially if it's not related to a construction or development, is that those guards will be there for infinity, or unless the school closes or and things like that, where we've seen that. And we did bring a report on the adult crossing guard program that talked about how we would look at removing guards when the need's not there. And so we would look at that, but I think the expectation from the community is that once a guard's there, especially if it's just the regular, day-to-day activities, is that guard will stay there. And the challenge is if it's funded by a source that's only for 1 year, it could become problematic. So, and the fact that it doesn't meet the warrants as well, we did revise the warrants to make it more easier to meet the warrants in terms of looking at different criteria. So for example, we used to look at, we do a study, and if there was a conflict at an intersection day, we did the study that it meet the warrants. But if we're there another day and there was no conflict, wouldn't meet the warrants. So we looked at exposure.
I just want to say this: let me work with my community, and I'll let them know, hey, at the end of the year, the funds run out. But I need a clear direction, Chair, from staff that if I can use my office budget to finance a crossing guard, it's up to me to work with my community and say, look, come June, money's over, we'll have to work on a plan. But that's where I'm at, Chair. I'm not asking for new money to be put into the budget. I want permission to use my own office budget and let me do that. So I just need staff to say, if that's doable, let me work with my community on that.
Chair, if I may, it's John. My recommendation would be, can we take that away? I have to talk to clerks and to the treasurer, unless the treasurer wants to comment today. Councillor Brockton, staff aren't, it's not about us not wanting to cooperate. We just got to make sure the rules around that commitment. And then also, Phil's got to think of a way as to if that crossing guard disappears, what's the safety risk and profile on that? So I don't want to make a rash decision and say no today or yes. If you would permit us, but I would like Wendy, the treasurer, to comment, because there are rules around funding things that if you're not elected in the future or things change in the community and so forth around that. So we have some homework to do there, unless Wendy or the clerk's office has an immediate response.
I just add to your response there, Mr. Manconi. Councillor, I agree. We should take this offline. There's a more holistic look that we have to put on this in terms of understanding that need. I will look at it from the financial perspective. I agree very much with Mr. Landry's comments. It is a temporary thing. So we need to understand that impact now and going into the future, but happy to work with you on this.
All right, Chair, I know there's a long list. I have a few more questions I'll ask at the end. Thank you.
That's wonderful. And thank you. I want to apologize to committee members. My bad. I've been hanging out with Riley so much on every committee. I forgot he's actually not a committee member. So that being said, Councillor Elshan-Thierry, you're up.
okay. I don't mind losing my spot for Councillor Brockington. That was our good question. About the budget. So Lila, I still see Lila's still there. So Lila, we heard a lot this year about the roadside grass cutting, and I see you reinstated in 2021 budget. Is that correct?
I'm unsure what you're asking. It has been in our budget. We do have a line item for it. It's just a matter of what our operations are managing in terms of the roadside budget. So it hasn't been taken out of our budget. We do have it there. So it's not, hasn't been reinstated.
So the reason we didn't do much roadside grass cutting, that's because of the COVID and staffing issue. Is that the reason? Because if it's still in a budget, so.
Yeah, so we do, I mean, we are looking at the priority areas to do roadside cutting. We do have, as you know, number of kilometers that we maintain citywide. So they are looking at more innovative ways on managing the roadside cutting. Are we cutting back to ditch lines? Are we cutting back to fence lines? So there has been some work done. Yes, was there a bit of an impact moving into this summer with COVID? We definitely had less staff working at particular times, just in order for us to manage the safety of our staff and to make sure that we had some of the priority tasks being taken care of. So we will definitely take a look at it. If there's specific areas that you're considering, please reach out and we can talk to you about specific areas.
Well, the reason I'm asking this question because it's not just about cosmetic or to look good. It's also road safety, because when you approach a stop sign in a rural area and 80-kilometer speed and the grass covering the stop sign, that's a concern. That's a safety concern. Now it's no longer it's just cutting the grass to make it look pretty. Now it's safety. So I need to, well, I'm glad it's still there. I'm glad it's still there. And I understand COVID-19 obviously made a change to the operation, but I will encourage you, this is not about cosmetic. We heard loud and clear from the farmers also, not cutting our grass on the side of the road is impacting with their field. So we have to make sure we still address this issue. But I'm okay with it. One item, and I'm not sure, I think Isabel, if she's still, or Wendy, it talk about expenditure by program, fleet, service manager. And the actual budget in 2019 was 509, but the forecast for 2020 was 9091. And then they talk about 2021 budget is budget 271, estimated 277, changes over the budget 2020 is 6. Is that in the fleet or is that a typo somewhere? I'm trying to understand this line item. I don't know if Wendy maybe can explain it.
Councillor, can you just tell me what page you're referring to first?
Well, I wish I had the page because I haven't paid. So anyway, okay. If it's not, you can send me the answer. I can send you the email and
yeah, we'll look at it while we're having the conversation this morning and get back to you. Thank you.
All right. So colleague, I know we heard earlier, one of my residents, that presentation is no surprise to any of us, and no surprise also to when he was asked about comparing our city to other 14 city in Canada. I don't think we never compare cities to Ottawa, because I just want to put it in a small perspective. My ward was Carton March, larger than the city of Calgary by 50 square kilometers. I have 805 kilometers of roads. Yes, and we still have gravel road, believe it or not. And I understand there is a need across the city, but I'm not sure how much really you can do anymore between affordability and what's on the front of us. I just, if any way and any other level of government can step up and help us. I have to tell you, this summer, we cannot fix the road was affected by the flood 2019. Even our staff identified those roads. They're safe. They call them safe, but they call them compromise. And yet the provincial government refused to help us with the $3.8 million to fix those roads to be accessible in case of another flood or in case of another emergency. So I just want you to know, we are trying everything we can. In 2012, some of you were not on council. We even made the huge investment to be able to catch up, because Mr. Home makes a good point. If we don't fix it today, it's going to cost us more in the next couple of years. I understand that. I think any one of us understand this. Question is, we don't even have the money today to fix that. Never mind. So I leave it with you. I know it's easy to those report we saw on the front of us. I was pleased at least to know the city took the initiative, and instead of waiting 10 years to catch up, right now we are in a 6-year bracket. If we continue of what we're doing with our investment, hopefully we can catch up. So, Mr. Chair, I want to thank you for, this is a good budget for us. I hope I heard from Mr. Willis. There's nothing we're not trying, whether to work with the heavy construction people or road builders. I mean, there's nothing we can do, even to the point where we were creative this summer. I made a switch with another councillor to be able to use my cash in lieu to pave roads. Somebody took a picture and called them worse than Kuwaiti's road. Well, I had to apologize to the Kuwaiti government because their road is a lot better than mine. But we fixed them with the cash in lieu. So there's nothing creative we try to do. We're not doing it right here. All what I'm asking, if city staff can tell us that there's always a list shovel ready, if the provincial government and the federal government decided to put some money in infrastructure, shovel ready, so we do have those lists available for us. And I'm not sure if Steve Willis or Wendy can answer this, but I think I know the answer, but I just want to hear from staff.
Chair, Councillor, yes, we do have, and it is in the budget book, actually, a list below the line. So we are ready if we have additional funding. We have a lot of projects ready that we can go ahead and move very, very quickly.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's my question. Wendy, I will send you an email with what I'm asking.
Great, thank you, Eli. Councilor Menard.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm going to start my question. There's 3 or 4 things I wanted to question on. One is on the fleet renewal. So I just wanted to come back to this because we've said that there's, for Mr. St. Louis, there's a sort of automatic conversion that we're trying to implement. But was the delegation, Ms. Angela Keller-Herzog, correct that there's 179 vehicles and they're not none of them are electric? Some of them may be hybrid. Can you just clarify on those new 179 vehicles?
The 179 vehicles, thank you for the question. The list provided are the old vehicles going out. So yeah, on there's nothing electric. Okay. But we are replacing them. As I mentioned, the plan this year is mainly heavy, but there are a number of smaller units that will be automatically converted to hybrid, and we're working on potentially up to 5 electric one in there. Okay. Still working on that aspect.
That's great. Can you send me more information offline about this, just in terms of, you know, the vehicles in our fleet replacement in the next, 5 years anticipated, and what we're anticipating to switch to electric versus not, and just some of the justification. It'll help me with some residents in my ward who are very much on this, and just to get a better understanding of the overall plan in the next little while. Is that possible?
Absolutely, can do.
Thank you so much for that. Regarding parking rates in this budget, I'm just wondering, there was a report produced a few years ago about the most effective way to reduce congestion without building expensive infrastructure, and it was around demand-based parking rates and parking rates. Does staff acknowledge the potential for inexpensive congestion reduction that can come from demand-based parking rates?
Chair, the parking services works within their the municipal park management strategy, and a lot of work went into that to drive our objectives and the directions for the program. We do draw a connection between parking rates and parking demand, and have started down that road of a more dynamic based pricing. Unfortunately, we would be well into that now, coming off of that strategy update last year. But the impacts of COVID have kind of sidetracked us slightly, but that is the intent, that we will be adjusting rates both up and down to reflect demand in accordance with our rate setting guidelines.
Very good. Thanks, Scott, and your team does great work. I appreciate that answer, and look forward to the future sort of changes that we would see to this. I think we shouldn't wait too much longer, so hopefully we can do that fairly quickly. I'm going to move to the funding from our traffic cameras. So I just want to try to understand as much as possible the amount of funding from our traffic cameras. I read it in the FEDCO report. There's a portion of that goes to OPS, the police service, and that is supposed to end within the 3 years that we had this. And I think we originally set this out in 2019. So is this the last year of the formula for how we distribute those funds collected from those traffic cameras? If you can just clarify for me and provide more intel.
I'm happy to speak to that, Councillor. Yeah, this is the last year of that funding strategy. So it was a 3-year strategy that we had to keep their tax rate down while they were doing activities sort of in the back end to find efficiencies. And this is the last flow through.
Okay, and it's 1.8 million, I think, that's going to OPS.
Yeah,
thank you. Is that on top of the 13.2 million, or that's part of it already?
No, that's on top of.
That's on top of the 13.2. Okay, and so that's scheduled for this year, but that's something that we could change in this budget if we so wished.
That would be at council's will.
Okay, so I'll work with staff on that in advance of council, because that's on top of the $13.2 million increase. Chair, I won't bring a motion today on it, but I will work with staff to see if that's something that we can look at reallocating, and as a signal to the future of where these funds should potentially go in terms of bang for our buck. So thank you very much, Ms. Stephenson. My last questions are all around road expansion, Chair. Do I have time to keep going?
I'm looking to Kelly. How are we doing time-wise?
You have 2 minutes.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Kelly. So it'd be no surprise to members on the committee, I'm skeptical of road widenings. And so series of questions around this. What evidence are we using that widening the roads that are proposed to be widened, the three roads on our agenda here, will lead to better traffic outcomes and reduce congestion over the medium and long term? What evidence are we using to implement these?
Chair, the background is that these roads are part of a network that was planned through the Transportation Master Plan, looking at the entire city, and they're part of the affordable plan. There were many more roads that were identified as needed, but because of affordability, we've scaled it back. And that's through the modeling, we assumed that there were the targets for the other modes were already reached. So this is the residual, and we still require roads. So because with congestion, I think when you widen, like I said, for the Alta Vista, Airport Parkway, it has had other benefits, not just the capacity in that corridor. It would alleviate some of the cut-through traffic in Riverside Park. The project itself also includes active transportation facilities. You'll have a wonderful long MUP on the west side of the parkway, and it connects communities. It supports active transportation. So this is, the bare minimum of our network that we're looking at. We've studied most of the major, all of the major transit projects already, and they're underway or will be underway, like stage 3 when funding occurs, but all the planning work's done. So now we're turning our attention back to the roads. So I hope I've answered your question.
It's helpful. I would like to see more evidence from staff about the congestion portion, though. I think some of those other pieces make sense, you know, some of the active transportation, other pieces around flow through traffic, but on the evidence of a reduction of congestion for these roads based on, you know, induced demand and what we've seen there, it's important that it's not just a 2 or 3 year resolution, that we see this in the long term, and that we're not just, you know, spending money to widen the roads for more traffic that we induce. That's the concern. And then the other concern I have is around both the Airport Parkway and the Bank Street between Leitrim and Dunskipper. What is the wisdom of expanding that Airport Parkway and that section of Bank Street when we're also investing so much in light rail to the airport, and when the Bank Street widening would compete with the new north-south LRT, which is to go to Leitrim? I'm really not understanding why would be widening roads in those same sections that LRT is supposed to go out to.
30 seconds.
Yes, so again, that boils down to the overall network modeling that we did. And again, you know, we pumped all the future demand, current and future demand into the transit corridors. And there's still a residual demand for road traffic, because not everyone will be able to take transit or use the LRT, because the road also provides other connections elsewhere, and the LRT is in its corridor. So we would have to go back to the TMP, and we're updating that. So we're going to review all of these needs, but the Airport Parkway widening had been identified for a long, long time, not just with the 2013 TMP, but the one before that. So again, I just want to emphasize that this is the residual. So both were identified in the TMP as being needed. We know that they're in similar corridor, but they also serve different destinations and different purposes as well.
Okay, but and this is my last question, Chair, what we would be advancing those projects before seeing what kind of capacity the LRT would be taking.
Okay, so this funding for the Parkway is just for design, same with Bank Street, which will take 2 years. And I know that the Trillium line will probably be in service before we even start construction on the Parkway.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Ms. G, and thanks, Chair. Back to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. On to Councillor, sticking with committee members here, Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I have a number of questions. Maybe start with the delegation and following Councillor Manal's points around the fleet. So could we understand, I think in the presentation it said that this year in 2021, we're planning to replace 162 vehicles. How many of those are planned to be electric?
Right now, as I just mentioned, we're working on up to 5 of them being electric.
Okay, and the remaining one, how many of them have a life cycle longer than 10 years?
I'm not sure what you're asking there.
So when we buy a vehicle, it has a lifespan. Like we know a Zamboni, for example, is 15 years. A bus half-life is at 7 years. We keep it for 15. So there's a number of life cycle. How long do we plan to keep? Do we have any vehicle in the 162 that are of a longer lifespan than 10 years?
Yeah, there's a good chance, but we're looking at heavy equipment, Councillor. The light equipment that has option where it can be electric or it can be hybrid, we are transitioning those.
Okay, and could you confirm that the one resurfacer that we're replacing this year is planned to be a pilot electric?
No. So what's happening with the pilot electric is, well, we had the pilot scheduled for 2020, but unfortunately because of COVID, some programs were canceled or delayed, so we're pushing it to 2021. That being said, we're delaying the replacement of Zambonis for this year, as many as we can. We still have to go through inspection on some of them to make sure, we can postpone it, and use the pilot for 2021 to inform the decision to replace 10 Zambonis. So we're trying to pilot it. As you know, we have 4 of them electric right now in our fleet. Unfortunately, they did not meet all the requirements from the clients. So with that new generation, we'll be piloting 2 different models this year. And as I said, it's going to inform the decision for future replacements. We're very hopeful.
Could we, so out of the 2020 segment, you are piloting a electric resurfacing. Is that?
We are bringing 2 different models of electric resurfacers. That's correct. That is over and above a replacement. They're like rentals, if I can put it that way.
Okay. And then can you confirm that based on this change of procurement that we're not expanding the procurement? Because that's where we got trapped a couple of years ago, is we had an existing procurement that forced us into purchasing a particular type. As the technology is evolving, can we make sure that it's not more than a year's worth of purchasing?
We can absolutely do that.
Okay, great. Okay, and can you maybe on the vehicle fleet point of view, so when historically, you bought vehicle X, it had a certain value, and then if you wanted to, at the time, we're going back like 10 years, if we wanted to make it hybrid, we went and picked in the green fund and then covered the amount. But now with the electrics, and I believe the latest report from the Public Policy Forum speaks of 2022 being full life cost of electric being the same as gas. So how do we do that? If the initial cost is more expensive, but the maintenance on the vehicle is the same, the green fund really shouldn't apply. I mean, we should straight on purchase those vehicles, even if at purchase price is more expensive.
That's correct. That's part of the Green Fleet plan that we're working on. How we're going to fund this moving forward based on total cost of ownership and numerous other factors. The Green Fleet Fund, as you've seen it in the past, we haven't submitted for it this year because, as I said, we're trying to embed that in our normal operating process. If total cost of ownership is equivalent, then yeah, we need to find ways to move that money around. But that's correct. We're still doing.
Okay, on page 34, we talk about a really good savings relating to similar conversation, but on the street lighting front. We're converting our street lights to LED, most of them's done, and we're saving money. We're saving 1.6 million. And I want to understand the public policy environment of those dollars, because to me, that's a really great way to fund new green vehicles, would be through those efficiencies, but I don't know where those funds are going as part of those savings on page 34.
Through you, Chair. So that saving of $1.5 million is going to fund the payout marking material that's required for the new payout marking truck. So that was the new payout marking truck, as you recall, was a report we brought forward to last year, and we've gone out and tendered a new truck. They're in the process of building it. And we're expecting to see it next spring, but it takes a different type of paint that's a lot more expensive. So we need that funding to allow us to buy the material under budget to apply the new paint on the roads.
Okay. On page 70, we're protecting transit corridor. I think that's an important thing, but there's no report of what lands have been protected yet. There's a 4 or 5 year plan. Is that possible to be able to share what acquisitions we've been able to make out of that account?
Sorry, Councillor, that's the corridor protection account that you're pointing to?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they tend to be for things like rail corridors when they come up for sale, and those are very expensive. So we're collecting a little bit each year to build up. We have some properties, there's one at the Beachburg North that was vacant, that was abandoned, and we're in negotiations on the acquisition of that. There are a few other parcels throughout the city where there was a commitment made to realign a road or realign something. So that's what that account is for.
More longer term, but have we acquired anything in the last 5 years?
Not in the, I don't know, but certainly not last year, but definitely in 2021, because we're under in discussions on some properties, there will be some expenditure against that account.
Okay.
And of course, when these, when the negotiations are finalized, there will be a report to FEDCO for each property acquisition, so council will know about that.
Okay, no, I appreciate the clarification. On the public works front, on page 30, there's a presented deficit, and it specifically lays it out, which is the Rideau River ice management of 500,000. It's actually an important measure, but could we understand the specifics of why it's cost us more to break the ice along the Rideau River?
Hi, Councillor. Thank you for that question. With the Rideau River Flood Control Program, that's just a flow through. We do recover those funds from the Conservation Authority, and it really is weather dependent on what those costs are annually. So those are recoverable, and that shows in our revenue.
Thanks for clarification. So it is covered through the RVCA. We're
Yes.
doing the work that they covered. Okay. In the same group, Lila, there's no growth for your team in public works. And as we know, we get more roads where there's more pressure to do more work. In my area, it's sidewalks. In other parts of the communities, it's different stuff. So we're a growing city. What I want to hear from you is in 2021, at the end, we should be seeing an NQS report. Will there be an FTE review as part of that effort to reflect the pressures that we're seeing?
Absolutely. Moving into 2021, it is a no growth budget for us, particularly because we understand that the city may be seeing some additional financial pressures due to COVID. But with the maintenance quality standard review that we're going to start a public consultation process in January, we are on track to bring back recommendations to committee and council in fall of 2021. And through that, we will also bring an implementation plan and potential budget impacts for 2022 and beyond. So at this point in time, yes, we are working on a no growth budget, but we do expect to be coming back to committee and council with recommendations and an implementation plan for those.
It's good to hear, because that was the hiccup for me in supporting this committee budget, was really to make sure that we're appropriately responding to our city's needs. So I'll wait for the MQS and put my attention there in terms of the FTE and resources. Mr. Chair, I have 2 more questions. Is it appropriate to ask, or do you want me to get back on?
I'll ask our timekeeper, Kelly. Where are we at?
You still have 1 minute, Councillor.
There you go.
You know what, Mr. Chair, I think I'd rather get back on, prepare my questions, and be succinct.
That's a great idea. Vice Chair Leeper.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I can be brief because most of the questions and concerns that I have been addressed by others. I would say, first of all, with respect to the fleet renewal and the question of electrification of that, I think staff are hearing a clear appetite on the part of committee members to delve a bit more into that and get more detailed information. I think in previous years, there may have been less interest in knowing which F-150s are going to be replaced with which other F-150s, but as we're faced with a climate crisis, there are clear questions. The 160 plus vehicles that we're going to replace, I'd like to know, which of those in any given year are going to be quote unquote light vehicles. What do we consider to be a light vehicle versus heavy vehicles, and what the procurement plan is for those. And I also share with Councillor Brockington in Phil's shop the concern over staffing with respect to temporary traffic calming measures implementation. One of the things that I've been doing more and more for the past couple of years is adding into my ward traffic calming budget with benefits money that arise out of developments. I just had my meeting yesterday with city staff, with Sophie and Robert, to talk about how are we going to spend our 2021 budget. It's close to a 2-hour meeting. Every one of those locations, I think I have probably 20 locations that we're evaluating, need to be evaluated by staff. And if I'm going to put a bunch more money into my traffic calming budget, you know, I could be doing, or could be asking staff to evaluate several dozen locations around the ward in a given year. That's a lot of work for staff. I haven't been told no yet, but it is a concern for me as we move forward, and I do start seeing more of that funding. Please, you know, be open to the notion of adding resources to help Sophie and Robert out in future years, because I don't want to be told, no, we can't implement measures that you have money for because we can't plan for them. The snow budget, which it's really interesting this year. We've barely talked about it. Very different from previous years. And I certainly appreciate the work that staff have done to go over and above in terms of funding every year to catch us up. I used to track inflationary pressures and average snowfalls, and I don't need to do that anymore because the snow budget now appears to be sufficient. I'm just wondering, given the light snow that we had in this calendar year, do we anticipate ending the year with a surplus for the first time in a while? Or how closely correlated are snowfall with surplus deficit?
So I do understand that the snowfall was slightly below average. I believe our average snowfall is about 223 centimeters. I think we received around 205 last year. But we did see more freeze-thaw cycles. So we are as close to an average winter, I think, than we have been in a long time. So yes, we are at this point in time, we are forecasting a slight surplus in our budget. Really, it's going to depend on how Mother Nature treats us over the next month. But you know, certainly with the changes that we made through the service delivery review, the additional funds that we received through our last budget process, we have been able to be fiscally responsible through this past year. And for the first time in very many years, we are looking to either be on budget or see a slight surplus by year end.
No, I am satisfied that you know, the past several budgets that have topped up the snow budget have got us to the point where we need to be, and hopefully in some years we'll see a surplus, and some years we'll see a deficit, and it will start averaging out a bit better than it has in past. I only have one final question, Chair, which is with respect to the Airport Parkway widening. I think if I saw the budget there, it was 7.36 million. Was added to that, or that may have been widenings overall?
Yeah, 7.36 million to start the design.
How much of that is DCs?
95%.
95%. So straight math to figure out the taxes going into that. Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Very good questions, Vice Chair Leeper. We have Councillor Kavanagh, and then for round two, we got Brockington and Fleury. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff, for the presentation. In terms of the speed cameras, we have one in Bay Ward, and I think it's been very successful, actually, on Bayshore Drive in front of a school. We really appreciate it. And I'm wondering about the criteria for spending the fines. How does that work? Is it put into a pot? Is it ward related, or is it how is it designated?
Through you, Chair. So this was addressed when we did our road safety action plan, that any revenue that came in through the automated speed enforcement would be reallocated to road safety. So the $4 million that's in the budget this year for 2021 comes directly from the automated speed enforcement program. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be bringing a report to committee in March that will outline our work plan for 2021 and how those funds would be spent. to try to reduce the serious collisions and fatalities in the city.
So it would be used for roads. It wouldn't be used for cycle or sidewalks or anything else.
It could be used for cycling safety, pedestrian safety. There's also a component that's tied to the operating costs. So in our budget, there's $1.245 million, and that's for the operating side, and that's taken out of that funding as well. So basically, the funding that's being reallocated to road safety is more than net after all the costs are addressed.
Okay, thank you very much. One of the concerns I hear about from cyclists and myself is connectivity. And how is this being addressed in the budget? How can groups, like if we put together a group in our ward, because we see issues, it's usually crossing main streets and things like that. How can we tie in so that we can get that addressed within this budget?
Councillor, well, actually, we are updating our active transportation master plan. We had a survey go out last month, and we're collecting a lot of input. And people are pointing out to us where there are gaps. There's just some, areas that may require a little bit of improvement to make it even more safe. So those things we are continuing to gather. And so if you want us to work with your group, please let us know. That's how we would build this into our active transportation master plan. And from there, the network is developed, and then funding is associated with that. And then we bring it forward year to year for you for approval of the budget.
Okay, thank you. We'll probably be working together in January. Is that still enough time?
Yes, because it's part of the transportation master plan, so there is still time, lots of time.
Good. Well, one of the big issues in Bay Ward right now is the fact that stage 2 LRT construction is going right through it. And one of the things that that happens is connectivity is important, getting to the stations. And it's a bit of a melange of the funding that was designated for stage 2 LRT, along with what the city is there's sort of a cross section. How is that sorted out in the budget? I was always wondering, because I never know who to go to about issues related to the construction and the D2s. Well, I have to say I've been well looked after by the stage 2 team, but in terms of the financing, how is that done? How is that sorted out?
Yeah, my team is having lots of interaction with Michael Morgan, the lead for stage 2. So we know what can be covered under stage 2 budget, and then we look at what we can provide from our own cycling program and pedestrian program. So we're coordinating our efforts there. You're right, it is very complex. And but we're working together on that, and we are listening to councillors who have put in requests or have made suggestions. So we're trying to make these things happen in a coordinated fashion.
I appreciate it, because that when we decided to budget for stage 2, there's so much that we didn't consider in terms of the interims and the construction and the detours, especially for cyclists and for pedestrians. And that's what keeps coming up. So I want to make sure it can be covered off. It's coming out of the fact that we're doing this project, which is a good project, but I want to know how it's being covered off.
Chair, Councillor, I know many of your issues there, but not just there, but also in the East End. And the benefits of having all modes under one department is Vivi, Phil, and Michael all report directly to me, and they know the mission. The mission is connectivity during construction and post-construction. If there's gaps, we've already assembled that team to bring forward any gaps and get them closed off before stage 2 opens up, because we want that connectivity. And as you know, we're dealing with the Parkway issue in your end. I know in the East End, we're dealing with some stuff over near Blair Station and so forth. So they're all under one roof. It's one view, it's integrated mobility, and we want people to walk, cycle, jog, rollerblade, all that stuff to those stations.
Thank you, Mr. Manconi. The other issue is the fact that the connectivity involves using NCC land. And one of the questions that keeps coming up is making sure that it's, and this is where it gets tricky because it's on NCC land, but we want to make sure that it's year-round connectivity, not just nice bike paths that are used in the summer, but full functioning with lighting and snow clearing. So how is that being covered off?
Well, we're Michael and myself are having those discussions. The big challenge is in the West End there in the Western Parkway. As I always say, the cyclists and the pedestrians really don't care what level of government owns the asset. They just want mobility, and we view it as one city. And so we're pushing hard. We may need some political help in that regard, but we understand the message and we know what we have to do. We may have some difficult discussions that we're going to look to council to help us push through. And over in the public works side of things, if they have to winter maintain them or do the electrical retrofits and so forth, there's money associated with that. So right now it's about having the right discussion that we want that connectivity, and then funding follows strategy. So it's mapping out how we move forward.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, because we've got some complicated situations, and they just keep coming up, and it's too bad they weren't sorted out earlier. But I get it that, but we're willing to work with the team and with yourself and your team. For example, out in Moody, we have along Moody Drive, a brand new path that the NCC built, redone, and it's beautiful, but it connects the new National Defense Headquarters with the station, but it's no good in the winter. It's not lit. It's not. It's meant to be a nature path, and it's not meant for connectivity in the full sense. So, are we having those discussions to make sure of that for the future budgets?
So we are, and I think the problem in the past has always been about winter maintenance and lighting. You know, the swing, I don't want to use the word pivot because that's the overused word right now, but the swing is connectivity. And, you know, I looked to Councillor Brockington, we had the exact same discussion with him. He has a missing link that goes over a Ontario Hydro corridor. There's a path. So the users can see it, they just can't use it. And so this is about not, you know, do we always need more dollars, or do we need to get smarter about using the assets? I'm not saying they're slam dunks. We're wide open to getting mobility on all modes freed up, and it can't always be about more money. But if it has to be, it will. We're working on the exact same situation with Councillor Brockington as you've described. That was a discussion, I believe, last Friday.
Thank you. Yes, and that's part of it, and is working with these other levels. Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Committee member Deans hasn't spoken yet, so it'll be Councillor Deans, and then Brockington, and then Fleury.
Thanks, Chair. I just have two quick questions. The first one is about our traffic signal program. The last budget I participated in, beyond growth, we only had money for one traffic signal where warrants had been met in the entire city. Just wondered how we're doing now.
Hi, Councillor Deans. We built a couple of intersections this year, and also through the Road Safety Action Plan, we were able to fund 2 pedestrian signals. One got built this year, one will get done next year. We also allocated some funding for detailed design so that it's basically the roads are ready to go, and it's just a matter of waiting for the funding. We used to have, I think, 30 locations that met the warrants that were below the cutoff line. Now I think we're on 26. So slowly but surely we're making improvements, but again, we are using the funding from the Road Safety Action Plan, getting a lot of the designs ready, which is in advance of what we normally have done. Because normally through our program, we'd have maybe 1 or 2 locations where we get detailed design done. Now we're getting 3 or 4. So we are preparing for if money comes down the pipe from any other levels of government, if that's the direction council would want us to take.
So it sounds like this is somewhat of a safety risk when you have 26 intersections that meet warrants and we don't have funding. Is that on the radar as something that we need to turn our attention to?
Yeah, it's something that's of concern. And again, I think through the Road Safety Action Plan is depending on how the pilot goes and how council directs us to move forward with the automated speed enforcement, that might be an opportunity to also fund some locations in the future, especially if there's more locations than what's out there today.
Okay, thank you, Phil. My only other question just relates to COVID impacts on this particular budget. Last week over at CPS, we heard that some of our parks weren't getting trailers because there had been this extra demand for construction site trailers because of social distancing and the requirements that the construction industry had. So I'm just wondering, in this budget, do we have any COVID related concerns, for example, with staff shortages or with any equipment or access to pavement or whatever? Are there any COVID related risks in this budget that we should be aware of?
Sure, perhaps I'll answer that question. We are in several construction projects seeing attempts at COVID-related delay claims that are coming in from various contractors. I think for the most part, our project managers have worked through a lot of the issues as we went, so there were no delays. I think we've been incredibly successful this year that all of our projects in the construction program have stayed entirely on track. So from our perspective, there is no there may be additional health and safety measures, but there is no delay legitimately in the project. I can't speak for the transit program. Mr. Manconi will have to answer, but I'm just talking about all the remaining projects. And so we feel normal inflationary components of our cost estimating is a reasonable approach for 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Mr. Manconi?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so our components on this are Phil and the traffic operations. So he's done a phenomenal job of keeping service going, and most of his staff have been in throughout COVID with the proper mitigations from the corporate team. And then VVG has done a great job on keeping going even the TMP, although it's at a slower pace than originally planned. All her files are moving forward, and so there's no big risks that are popping out. And our management team reviews it 3 times a week on all those fronts.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Great, thank you. Councillor Brockington.
Chair, Councillor Cavan and I had a unanimous motion passed recently encouraging folks to get out this winter. We have a number of older adults who normally vacation south of the 49th who are staying home this winter. My office has had multiple requests the last few weeks for more plowing this winter in communities, keeping people within their community, but plowing. Has staff taken that into consideration? Are there any additional walking trails or MUPs not normally plowed that will be this winter? And how can staff work with councillors to identify 1 or 2 paths in their area, even if it has to be financed through our office? But how can we address these? I think the demand is probably transcends multiple wards. Could staff just comment on that, please?
Thank you for that question, Councillor. I mean, moving into this winter with COVID still around us, it definitely is a new experience for all of us. We are considering how people's lives and habits have changed throughout this pandemic, and we are making adjustments to our snow clearing operations in order to basically benefit as many residents as possible. In terms of additional pathways, parkland locations, we are working very closely with our colleagues in recreation, in the recreation department, as well as park services to put criteria in place to help us determine which areas and which pathways or sidewalks are going to give the most benefit for recreational activity throughout this winter. We do certainly want councillors to reach out to give us some of the suggestions that we can look at. And we definitely are listening to what residents are saying as well. Obviously, as you're aware, we can't maintain everything, but we do want to take a look at those areas that are going to be the most benefit to the most residents that we can.
So, Chair, to Ms. Gibbons, do you have that capacity? Or I've got 2 paths. I don't want to get into it here, but I want to work with you offline. But I have 2 paths I want to put on the table. I'm willing to contribute out of my office budget. I see this as, maybe this winter, and then we develop a plan going forward. But how much capacity do you have to absorb these requests versus looking to members of council to offset some of that, the funds?
So the capacity is really going to depend on the winter that we're going to receive. So, I mean, we'll know storm by storm, but what we can do is there's a potential of bringing in external services where they are available. There's a potential of readjusting some of our priorities to make sure that that different areas have the focus than we have in the past. But there is also there can also be a little bit of a delay as well if we do take on some additional pathways or multi-use pathways. We may, with the understanding of council and the residents, it may not be that preliminary priority, but definitely get to it so that we do have access through the winter months. So we have a number of ways that we can manage this going forward, and it really is going to be on a case-by-case basis. So I would love to hear more about those particular areas that you're considering offline, and we can take a look at how we can prioritize those within our operations.
Thank you. You'll get an email in 9 seconds. My last question, it just goes back to Ms. Chi, Chair, if I can. Ms. Chi, you answered a question, I think, from Councillor Fleury about the Beachburg line, which goes through River Ward. For folks who don't know this, this is from Walkley Yards, a freight line that goes westbound all the way to west of Ottawa. How far west does that line end that you're looking at acquiring? From the Walkley Yards to where?
Actually, it's the northern section. It's from Carling all the way to the river. So that's the segment that we're talking about now. The central part is was not up for sale as yet. So it's more the northern section through Canada.
So just to back up, there was a memo there that I thought that you issued maybe up to a year ago that talked about the line that goes through from the freight yards westbound. And
yes.
Okay, so
yes.
you're not in negotiations for that line yet.
Not yet.
But it's still a line of interest to the city of Ottawa.
It would be, but it's not on the market. And right now it has been abandoned, but not on the market just yet.
Fair enough.
Negotiations.
I appreciate that. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fleury, and then Councillor Kavanaugh again.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Now I have two sets of questions. I'll start with parking. So Scott, there's a number of issues with the parking charges that I know you have been trying to stick handle through. Let me describe them. So weekdays, people can come and support businesses in the market. If you go down into the Byron Market specifically at 9 a.m. on a Monday, it's dead quiet, yet we're charging for parking. Same day, you show up at 5:30, it's packed in the area, and it's free parking on street. When are we going to see a shift of that? The BIA's asked for those times to be shifted up to encourage, to ensure that there's less payment or reduced payment when there's a lot of capacity and vice versa on street. And the same applies to parking lots. And I make this to our lots in the market. I applaud the work you've done there, and I applaud as well the flexibility. But I do want to understand how we're planning to adjust, especially coming out of COVID. Want to support our businesses, want folks to come when it is quiet, and we don't want to like mix match the charges with a quiet period.
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So I think you captured very well, something that's very evident to us, and it was evident to us in going through the municipal park management strategy update that we completed last year. And it's actually one of the takeaways that we have is to undertake a review and to find some equity and to properly apply those our principles around rate setting and reflecting demand. So yeah, evenings is certainly something we have to tackle and look at, as well as weekends, because there's an inconsistency in terms of where paid parking exists on Saturdays, and we have obviously there's a lack of paid parking on Sundays. So that's something that we are rolling together. We've actually started to make some ground in terms of putting that project together to look at that. It wasn't something we could do. It was a little too big for the strategy piece. So that's why it's a follow-on initiative. And we hope to be into that in 2021 to come to some outcomes, potentially by the end of the year.
Do you have the flexibility within the user brackets that we're approving today to implement that?
Yes, Councillor. We the rates that are set are maximum rates that we can work within, and both on street as well as off street. We've set the rates so that we have flexibility to work and to properly reflect demand. So we're confident in that sense.
Okay, two more questions on parking. So on page 91 and 92, there's life cycle parking operations and life cycle parking facilities. Is it possible to share with local councillors kind of the capital plan of each of these of the lots? Because I find it bizarre. I come all of a sudden and then there's an improvement needed, for example, to lot X in my area. And I don't discount the need, but I don't see the outlook of what's needed over time. So would that be a possibility to share with council councillors?
Absolutely, Councillor. Take that as a takeaway to follow up and work with ISC to make sure that we provide that information.
Okay, and last one on parking. So currently, the numbers I got from you was around $20 million we have in the parking reserve fund. As part of this year, loss of revenue, we're shrinking that by 4.5 million or 5.4 million. What is the status? Because yesterday at FEDCO, I saw, for example, that the Central Library had a parking allocation of around 18 million. Like, what is assigned out of that bucket in the reserve fund for project, and what remains truly as a reserve account?
Absolutely, Councillor. So I'll speak specifically to the library piece just to address that. And when the funding for the library was approved, the construction of a limited parking facility underneath was part of that. And part of those funds were taken from the cash in lieu, the parking cash in lieu account, and it was a complete drawdown on that. And then the remainder of the funds were approved to be debt financed. So none of those funds will come out of the parking reserve fund. We do have initiatives and that are identified. There are there's technology related investments that we're targeting kind of in the medium to long range, and there's also partnerships with developers that we're looking at as well. And yesterday at FEDCO was also the Byward Park Public Ground Plan was tabled. So that has to be accounted for. And there's other, we're looking as well at similar opportunities in places like Little Italy. So we obviously need to work within the constraints of what we have, and the current pandemic situation has impacted that. So this is something we'll have to assess and reassess on an ongoing basis.
Thank you for the clarity. And again, to my colleagues who have Parks and Ride, we're still able to fund increases to Parks and Ride out of the reserve fund, right?
Yes, Councillor. We fund the maintenance of the park and rides out of the parking fee revenues, and in the event that our parking reserve fund balance exceeds the maximum that we've set, or that top end, we do have the flexibility to contribute any excess funds to either park and ride capital related costs or road reconstructions where there is paid parking.
Thank you, Scott. My last question is around PTIF funding. So on page 119, there's an identified PTIF debt of 258,000. And on page 80, there's a PTIF debt payment of 3.9. And it's sort of the first year I clued into that. Could we just get clarity on how we account for that, and why did we report as the debt and as such?
It's Isabel, Jasmine, Chair. What we did at the time, we were identifying projects that would qualify for PTIF, and in many cases we had to advance project. and we didn't have necessarily funding associated for those projects. So what we did is we called it PTIF debt, but what it was is because we're advancing projects, it's being paid for in future budgets for projects that would have been advanced, would have been in those future years, then we deduct it. So it's not really debt, it's just paying back with future projects.
Is this the last year of that PTIF debt, or can we expect
Yes,
more?
I believe that this year, next year, and there may be some in 2023, projects that were in 2023 that we had advanced, but it's minor dollars.
Okay, thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you for that. On to Councillor Kavanagh and Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brockington reminded me about another issue, and that's related to, in terms of keeping people active, one of the constant requests we're getting, and this is new this year, is keeping them up clear, because previously we just let the snow pile up on it, and this is in front of Andrew Hayden Park, which acts as a sidewalk, and we're getting a lot of seniors in the area desperate to walk. They're also asking for the parking lots to be clear, because traditionally the gates were locked and you weren't supposed to use the parks in the winter. I noticed that up on the NCC territory, up off of Moody Drive, the parking lots are actually cleared by the city for people to go for walks, and they're very popular. I took our grandkids there last weekend, and that's good. However, our own city parks, people do not have access to walking around. Now, I've also had requests for them to, clear the paths, and I got the answer back for that's not possible due to the fact that the paths aren't designed to be cleared. But we do have the winter trails coming in, and the Britannia Winter Trails is coming right up to Andrew Hayden Park. So there is more possibilities here now for this year, because people will want to go on those trails. So I'm asking about the parking lot possibly being cleared, and I did raise this with Dan Chenier, and also the MUP in front of Andrew Hayden Park, which is basically a sidewalk that previously never got cleared. Are these things that we can look at?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we are actually, we just had a meeting a couple of days ago with our counterparts in recreation to look at what's possible moving into this winter. We do know, I believe there has been some decisions made on the parking lot at Andrew Hayden Park, so I won't speak out of place, but definitely we can touch base after. In terms of in some of the MUPs and some of the pathways through our parkways, absolutely, we have to consider the construction of these pathways to ensure that it can withstand our equipment, because we don't want to cause those additional damage issues as we move into the spring, summer. So there are some that aren't maintainable by us, but I would most definitely be open to speaking to you about potentially some partnerships, because some of these pathways that are being maintained through, whether it's cross-country ski clubs, and that there may be an opportunity. They use less heavy equipment. I think for the most part they use skidoos. Is there a potential to partner where there is some snowpack conditions that are easier to walk on during the winter months? So definitely open to having those conversations, looking at all sorts of ideas in order to improve winter operations moving into this pandemic year.
That's fantastic, Leila. The reason that the Britannia Winter Trails is extending to Andrew Hayden Park is because Accor Village gave a donation. Yes. So that's why it wasn't to do with the city. It was because Accor Village wanted to encourage skiers from their community. So it's going up to the edge, but they could only just go to the one edge of it. And of course, the park is quite large. It's a kilometer long. I run it fairly regularly, so I know exactly how long it is. People are very, very keen. And frankly, flattening down the snow and making it
Councillor Kavanagh, just
better.
being cognizant of time here.
Okay.
Do we have a budget related question?
It is. It's related to,
Good.
can the MUP be plowed this year within this budget?
Correct.
So we'll have to consider those again. working with our counterparts in recreation and parks, just to make sure that we can do it in terms of the construction of it. But more importantly, does that offer the most benefit to the residents in the area? So we will definitely have those conversations moving forward, because that one is on our radar.
Thank you. And I believe that that's possible to give budget to Britannia Winter Trails, and they can do it for a lot cheaper rather than doing a plow. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hubley is the last speaker on the board.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just have a couple of quick questions. If Wendy's still there, I'd just like to confirm, following up on Councillor Brockington's comments, can we also use our office budget to hire extra plows and get extra plows on the pathways and sidewalks?
Thanks, Councillor, for the question. And I was politely reminded that councillor budget expenses are not to be used for city operations. So technically, no.
Okay, so thank you, Wendy. But Lila, you seem to suggest that you have some capacity for these requests. So I'm assuming there's contingency funds or something you can use.
There's not contingency funds that we can use, but we certainly understand the conditions that the city's in moving into this winter, and how we want to support more people getting out for recreational activity to be safe, through the pandemic. So we will do the best that we can to adjust. If Mother Nature cooperates with us this year, because we are now fully funded for winter operations, we may have some capacity to do some additional work. But that, again, really will depend on how our winter conditions are. And sometimes it may take a little bit more time to get to some of these either MUPs or sidewalks or pathways that are new to our operations. But there is some opportunity to maintain them.
I think that should be fully understandable, that you can't get there in the 24-hour cycle or whatever for additional pathways being offered. But I tend to agree with Councillor Brockington that, especially during COVID, there is a desire, and you might even want to call it a need, for people to get out and move around a little more. We've already received requests, and I've submitted them through to your folks a while ago to do some maintaining of the pathways around the Canada Rec Center, for example. And I've forwarded this to your attention now, because in our case, the newsletter's deadline is tomorrow, and that's the last community paper that'll be published before Christmas. So if we want to encourage people to do this, I think we should look at trying to find some way to designate some funds so that your people can do it, with the understanding, as you said, that it won't be in the first 24 hours after the storm or anything like that, but hopefully within several days of the storm, we could get out there and get it cleared, so that it'll be a reasonable expectation that over the winter there will be paths available for the majority of the days for folks to use. So I wonder if you want to take that Councillor Brockington's suggestion away and come up with a plan, whether it be to ask each councillor to identify areas, or just pick regional, like east, west, south areas, but try to get some pathways added in there, because I think it would be very healthy for people. Could you do that?
We'll certainly take that away and find a best process. Right now, we've just been receiving requests either from residents or councillors. If there's a better way to look at it, we'll definitely come back to you with a process that'll work best for everyone.
Okay, and please keep in mind my email to you is time sensitive. So if you get a chance to look at that, I appreciate it.
I will take a look at that right after this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Hoodley. So just seeing no more questions to staff, I just wanted to say, first of all, big thanks to staff. I've had the opportunity as chair to socially distance and visit some of the shops, and they've had to change their procedures completely. The fact that we're able to actually come back with the city budget, still targeting 3% with all the COVID conditions, still blows my mind. I think we also had some good points related to, we're very happy as councillors to see increased snow budgets because when the budget isn't there, it's our phones start to ring, and it's one of the core services that I see that we have to do. Last, we've heard from a few people that would like to see some more in the way of roads and other things, but unfortunately didn't bring any examples of what the offset would be. And especially in this year, if it wasn't for the fact the feds and the province came to our aid and helped offset a lot of our losses, we would be in a far worse condition. So I think we all want to see more, but at the same time, no one wants to see increased taxes. That being said, I'm going to turn to our vice chair, our wonderful vice chair Leeper, to walk us through the roadmap motion. And Kelly, flag me if we go too fast, too slow. Or do we have to approve the amendment first, I believe?
Yes, Chair.
So on the amendment that Vice Chair Leeper read before, just about Bank Street, a technical, is that carried?
Carried.
Great, thank you. And now we'll go to the roadmap motion.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, so moved that Transportation Committee recommend that Council sitting as Committee of the Whole approve the Transportation Committee 2021 draft operating and capital budget as follows. 1, the Public Works and Environmental Services Department budget as follows. A, General Manager's Office and Business Support Services Operating Resource Requirement, page 2.
Is that item carried?
Carried.
Thank you.
B, road services as follows. 1, user fees. 2, operating resource requirement.
Is that item carried?
Carried.
C, parking services as follows. 1, user fees 8 to 12. 2, operating resource requirement, page 7.
Is that item carried?
Carried.
2, the Transportation Services Department budget as follows. A, traffic services as follows. 1, user fees, pages 15 to 17. 2, operating resource requirement, page 14.
Carried.
Carried.
B, transportation planning operating resource requirement, page 19.
Carried.
Carried.
3, Innovative Client Services Department Fleet Services Budget as follows. A, user fees, pages 22. B, operating resource requirement, page 21.
Carried.
4, Transportation Capital Budget, pages 23 to 26, individual projects listed on pages 42 to 133, including revised pages 77 through 108. Is there a subclause to that, Kelly?
Nope, that's the end of it.
Thanks.
Just to clarify, pages 77 and 108.
And 108, sorry.
And
Chair, if I could just
yes, Councillor Menard wishes to dissent.
I'll dissent on that as well, please.
On 3 parts within their capital projects. And these 3 capital projects, Airport Parkway, Bank Street, and Strandherd, have been sent to the clerks. Is that sufficient, Kelly?
To my understanding.
Great.
That's correct. That's correct. Thank you, Chair, for pulling those out as those 3 capital road expansions.
Wonderful.
I'll agree with Councillor Menard's dissent, please.
So on the rest of that capital project item, is that item carried?
Carried.
Great. So at this point, I'll just quickly flip over and we will go to the next item on the agenda, acquisition of a part of 300 Wiggins Private from Ottawa Community Housing for installation of an all-way intersection. Councillor Fleury, if you wanted to introduce your motion, we'll get that put up on the screen, and then we'll go.
I wonder if I've sent visuals to Kelly. I wonder if she's able to share the screen so I can properly explain to committee the situation.
Oh, sure. We'll just get the motion read first, if you can read the motion, and then we'll go to the visuals.
Oh, there's no motion, Mr. Chair. It's a report.
Forgive me, the report.
Yeah, the recommendation was in the agenda.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, let's put up the visuals.
Wonder if we could have the, okay, so maybe the other one's a little better just to set the context, and we can go to that one after. Sorry, Kelly.
Apologies. Do you want the picture or the map?
The picture, please.
That's okay. Hang on. Bear with me.
Okay, so let me locate you. You're on Chapel Street, looking north towards Man. This was a change. So at some point in time in the 70s, this community was built, which is called Strathcona Heights. It's the largest Ottawa community housing community in Ottawa. If you see the road ahead of me, it's Chapel. And there was an issue at some point where folks were using off of Lee's Chapel to divert off of King Edward. So councillors moons ago, this obviously predates amalgamation even, restricted movement through Chapel. You can see that it's a bus-only corridor. So if the city, the challenge I'm faced with is you had a report earlier on the always stop sign. So typically I would bring forward a similar report, which wouldn't bring issues. In this context, we've been advised that we can't do that because OCH, so another owner, owns part of the intersection. So as you can see on the back end of the sidewalk on your left and the sidewalk on your right is Ottawa Community Housing property. So I've been working with OCH, with city staff, with residents, and this is an issue that's come about from residents of OCH, where residents who live on the left side of the street, which is, a very isolated community, connect with the main office, with the park that's located, and even the LRT that's located on the right. So they want a safe crossing. And what's happened now is cars either do the illegal movement through Chapel or they turn right into Wiggins. There's been a dog that's been killed at that crossing, and there's also a younger resident that had a wheel right over his foot. So as you can see, we've added some measures temporarily, but it's important for me as a local councillor to bring forward the all stop sign report that we have frequently at committee. That would be covered, the cost for that would be covered out of my TTC. The sticky item relates to the land transfer. So OCH is covering its internal costs relating to the land transfer for that intersection. And there are some internal costs relating to real estate and relating to legal fees of $15,000 that are identified by staff. Now, Kelly, if you go to the next item. So what you'll see is a map of the area. There's no easy way to fund these sorts of land acquisition, and CREO doesn't have the budget. So what I'm trying to do is there is a road reconstruction project, and it's Google Maps not really great, but what the visual you saw here is the street that goes through Chapel. At the corner of Chapel and Man, which is the closest city street, the city has an extensive infrastructure project that's well underway. It's a $12 million project, and out of that, I'm asking for $15,000 for the city to do legal fees and real estate work to enable the always stop sign at Chapel and Wiggins, as we regularly do at committee. So I know it's unusual. Usually, you're right, Mr. Chair, that we would be dealing with private developers, which would have some financial capacity. In this case, it's with OCH, and the issue was raised by tenants of Ottawa Community Housing. So it's been a number of years actually that we've been working on this. We've tried some measures, and here we are today to ask for two front. One, which is the regular always stop sign through my TTC coverage, which we ask all the time at committee. The uniqueness is around the acquisition of the intersection itself, and that's at a cost of $15,000.
Great. Good introduction, Councillor Fleury. I do see a question from Vice Chair Leeper.
Thanks, Chair. So if I understand, I just want to make sure I understand staff's reticence to support this. OCH is obviously plain ball. The request to put in all-way stop control is not all that different from what councillors frequently do. If I understand the reticence, though, it stems from taking the funds out of an unrelated road project. I guess that's probably a renewal project that is not yet closed, and allocating them to this initiative. The unintended consequences seem to be what staff are warning us about. And my struggle is to say, look, this looks like a fairly creative way of getting something done, but I also don't want to do something without understanding whether we're putting ourselves on a slippery slope. So can you take that through, take me through that slowly?
So, Chair, if I may, Phil might want to add to this because there are two sides to this. There's the technical side related to the traffic operations in that area, and I'm not the expert. I defer entirely to Phil or Mr. Manconi on that issue. On the financial issue, I think you have portrayed the issue correctly. This is a small amount of money. Corporate Real Estate Office has no budget for opportunistic acquisitions. They only have budgets for acquiring land in capital projects that are approved by council. So there is no pool of money to draw from something like this that would be opportunistic. The precedent of taking money from a capital project, an unrelated capital project, and applying it in here, you can appreciate we're nervous about that. There are opportunities at capital close to do creative things. This is mid-year. This is midpoint before we would be at a capital close. The precedent is the concern. The concern is that, you know, with all due respect to councillors, that others may try to do this, and then suddenly all of our capital projects don't have a predictable and stable funding source to complete as council has directed us to do.
How can you run me through that capital? I think, I'm sorry, I wrote down the names. It's the Man Templeton project. I assume that's a road renewal. How big an authority do you have on that one?
Karina's looking that up while I am just initially starting. So it is a road renewal project. If you just give us one moment, we'll get the amount.
I think it's 12 million. That's what.
Through the chair. So yes, it's 12 million, right, Councillor Fleury? So yes, it's an ongoing road integrated sewer project. Like, you know them well, Councillor Leeper. We've done a number of those in your ward. So it is ongoing, not completed yet. And there's a request to use part of the funding for that project to buy the land for this intersection.
And just to put it again, you're worried that if we establish that precedent, that when councillors start seeing one-off needs, that they're going to go to nearby capital projects and start transferring money out of those.
Yes, councillors, appreciate this was with the greatest respect to all of the members of committee. We had discussions earlier about how stretched our reconstruction budgets are. It is a concern to us if these things come up as unplanned activities, that is a pressure on the system. Ultimately, we will take council's direction on this. As I said, this is not a large amount of money. This is council's decision. It is yours to make, but the precedent is the concern from our department. And I also reiterate that there are technical issues related to this that I'm not the expert on.
And that relates to the unwarranted AWCS.
Chair, if I may, yeah, again, I'm totally sympathetic to what Councillor Fleury is trying to do, but you know, let's make this real. We're in your hands today, but let's make this real. Councillor Deans rightfully brought up an issue of warranted signals. you know, you're putting staff in a very awkward position where if we're going to start rating other accounts and make a link to, there's a nearby account. If you were going to ask me where to start investing in that approach with, I'm sure the treasurer's got comments on that. I would go right to where Councillor Deans was going, where you look at your highest risks. You've got warranted traffic signals and you all have them. And so we are not trying to be obtuse or difficult in any way here. We are clearly in your hands. We have an obligation to tell you, don't meet warrants. There's a private property issue. You're going into making a very innovative approach to tapping into a nearby account. And I will ask Wendy to comment on that also. But you know, traffic is all about risk-based assessment. If I have to start making connections to other capital accounts, and Wendy permits us to do that, which I doubt she will, I'll go right back to where Councillor Deans is talking about in terms of safety. And I see Councillor Menard just turned his cameras on. He has safety issues. So we could start to really expand out of control in terms of how we make these connections to other accounts. I'm not downplaying the issue. This is one that is really in your hands. We're here to give you the best advice and to make sure that we're staying congruent on how to manage the finances and run the policies and the processes associated with traffic management.
But is it out of control? I mean, we're talking about $15,000 on a project that has a capital budget of, you know, well north of $1 million.
I'm commenting on the context of I'm spending $15,000. Meanwhile, I've got unwarranted, fully warranted traffic signals that present a higher danger to the public. I'm just trying to square that up, Councillor.
No, I get it. I'm gonna listen to my colleagues. I see a couple of other hands up.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair.
Great, thank you. Councillor Menard and then Councillor Fleury.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chair. I just want to make sure I understand properly. If the other project was completed, the capital project in the neighborhood, and I'm on this neighborhood a lot, the points Councillor Fleury's making around the concern of the intersection are completely real and exist. So I mean, I see it all the time there. But so the concern is real. But what are we saying is that the project's not complete, so we don't want to shift funding. But if the project was completed, there might be an availability of some extra funds there that could be allocated, because certainly that's been done many times in the past where a project gets completed. There's extra funds available there that were not spent to enhance other aspects of that area. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding fully.
So Chair, this is not an issue about the availability of $15 million. We can address that within the scope of it. And in the other examples you're listing, those are usually scope changes to a project. So for example, in the Elgin Street project, we finished below budget. We had a request for additional funds to enhance the cycling safety. That's within the same project, and council gave permission on that. And that is a normal capital shift that happens with a scope enhancement when we found savings. And staff, that's normal, and we have a process for dealing with it. This issue that Mr. Manconi has raised is that we are taking money for a completely unrelated project, and then we are attaching it to an intersection resolution and avoiding the list of warranted intersections that are unfunded. And we were here last year talking about a Councillor Dean's project, and forgive us, Councillor Deans, you just the example we're giving, it's the one I remember, but I know it's been more than one. We've had other wards. So it's an issue, Council, it's an issue about setting the priorities about how you want to take that money. And again, it's not about the money, it's about how the process of how you allocate the money.
Okay, because I assume we can find 15,000 somewhere else for this. Process aside, I assume that type of funding could be found. It's the other piece of it, the private kind of purchase and that working that through, that seems to be more of a sticking point with the always stop. So anyway, I just wish we could find a solution for it without having to go through this process. But anyway, thank you.
Great. Councillor Fleury, and I see nobody else, so feel free to wrap up.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee members, for your engagement. I do have a question to Mr. Landry or Mr. Manconi. I would ask committee to split the issue. we get to see reports at committee all the time about always stop sign. Mr. Manconi, Mr. Landry, we had a always stop sign earlier in this agenda. Most of us who are on committee and council have asked a report for TTC measures coverage, which I am, for unwarranted stop sign. What was different in terms of the warrants or not meeting the warrants from the previous report today?
Phil?
I think the biggest issue with this one is that the side street isn't a public right of way, and that's why you need to acquire the property, because the Highway Traffic Act doesn't allow for multi-way stops to be installed at those type of locations. In terms of the warrants, we just approved a couple of months ago the warrants for an updated warrant system. Now there'll be times where councillors will come, and like you mentioned earlier, Councillor Suds had her report come to committee today. There's always situation in Councillor Suds's report. One of the challenges was that there was actually paver stone markings across the intersection, which was done as part of the site development when the road was built. So that becomes problematic, because there's an expectation from a pedestrian's perspective that you see the markings there or the paver stones there, and I can cross, because we normally only allow crossings where it's protected. So again, we provide our recommendation in terms of the warrants. It's up to council to ultimately decide how they feel best to approach the situation. So our role is to provide the guidance in terms of what the warrants say and why they meet or don't meet the warrants. And then councils can decide how they want to proceed.
So I guess I'm asking committee not to consider the issue of not meeting the warrants, because we're continually seeing councillors' reports at this committee because it doesn't meet the warrants. So, and we don't ask questions to staff, but the answer that you would get if you'd ask questions to staff is what Mr. Landry and Mr. Manconi told you earlier. So I guess I'd park that issue, because we carried Councillor Suds' report without questions a few meetings ago. I believe it was Councillor Dean's. We've been doing this even for previous chairs when Blair and Keith Eglai was there. The issue I have is, how do you fund property acquisition, and why is this unique? So I've tried to work on an approach. There's no funding that was able to identify. There is local funding that doesn't affect any of the projects in your ward. That is the closest city street away. And it doesn't affect that account. You don't have access to that money. It's already assigned to that project. So for me, it is unique, but you also don't have a situation where this is the OCH, the single shareholders, the City of Ottawa. The $15,000 costs are for internal costs for legal and real estate fees. So for me, it's a question of, how do you fund acquisition for a city's interest? How do you do that? So maybe Wendy, I can ask that question, is what would be the best source of funds to cover the 15,000?
So Councillor, I have to say that I can't support taking the money out of the other capital project. That is not the right thing for us to do. We've set the budget based on the need, the construction costs, and that money is there for that particular item. We'd really need to take this away to determine where we could find those funds. I don't have a quick answer for you today. As you know, the city is in, I'm going to say, still in a state of slightly financial distress. We don't have an answer yet back from the province in terms of where we're going to end at the end of this year to know whether we're going to be made whole or not. So our financial situation is very precarious. But generally, when we're looking at capital construction, what we do is we build into those projects that land acquisition. So if there's something happening, then that piece becomes part of that project. And that's how we deal with it from a general perspective.
Okay, well, so procedurally, I'm looking to Kelly and Caitlin. I mean, the CFO has just talked about taking this away. So do I just table this report, and when I can come forward with a different source of funds, we bring it back? How does it work procedurally?
Mr. Chair, the committee has a number of options here, which could include a motion to table or defer this matter to another time.
Okay. Well, based on the comments from Wendy, Mr. Chair, I'm comfortable with moving a deferral motion based on the airing, but I would say that it's a bizarre one. It's a very bizarre one. OCH is covering its own costs, and I have to find $15,000. So I'll work with Wendy if we can get, I don't know procedurally if I move it, Caitlin, or if I ask Councillor Leeper to move it.
First of all, I actually have a question of staff first, just to check in on something. I'm glad to hear that you're looking to defer this, because first of all, I don't think anyone is looking at this and saying, well, it's $15,000. Question to staff: can the councillor use his office budget?
No, he cannot do that. This is an operational expense.
Okay, so it is a bit of a quandary. First of all, I think you've heard from the staff on this one. The concern is all related to the private property and the precedent that this could set. It is a real challenge for us, and I'm very happy. Thank you, Councillor Fleury. I believe you also have an inquiry later on related to some other items. So looking to the clerk's office, is Vice Chair Leeper okay to move deferral of this report, and staff can continue to work on this?
Yep. So, Mr. Chair, the options would be a motion to defer this matter to a specific date of a future committee, or a motion to table the matter, at which point it could be brought forward again anytime within the next 6 months. It could be lifted from the table and considered at a future meeting. So we're in your hands, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair.
Well, I guess it's going to come down to staff. Do you think is there something that could be looked at before the next transportation committee meeting, or should we deal with this now?
Chair, it's John. I agree with Wendy. I think we got to take this away, because I think we're doing some policy on the fly here. My understanding is that his office budget could cover this because it's capital. It's the acquisition of the land, property. So where I was going to go was, and I'm in your hands, Councillor Fleury and Chair, was that you fund it from your office budget if committee approves this.
Forgive me, John. 1 second. Just to be clear, Wendy, I asked her about office budget. Actually, I think it's the traffic calming budget can be used and applied. Yeah, just to clarify that, and maybe Wendy, can you clarify that? Would that be correct?
Thanks. Yeah, no, you can't use it from the office budget, but traffic calming, I think could be an appropriate source here.
Okay. So, Councillor Fleury, I think you have an option. Do you not have the $15,000 remaining this year?
I don't.
And Wendy, is he allowed to take the money from future years to the end of term of council? That's my understanding.
You would have to do it once the budget is approved, and this would have to be approved ultimately by committee and council.
So it could be a timing issue.
Yeah. So maybe we just table it, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to clarify. Thank you for clarifying. I know that it seems obvious to use TTC or even office budgets. There are limitations to that, and I'll take it away with staff on the 15 grand that's left. Again, if we could table it, the issue's been aired, and glad to work with staff on it.
Chair, I'll move to table the motion to the report.
Actually, hold on 1 second. Mr. Manconi?
Yes.
So just looking at this here, you just said that you would go and work with it. Would you suggest the tabling of this report?
Well, I was trying to get a solution here that if the committee was approving it based on the councillor paying out of his traffic budget, which I thought he had balance left to do that. with a caveat that if there was a reimbursement process that Wendy could identify, that could have cleaned up this whole issue today. Was trying to get it off your table. That doesn't sound like that's where the councillor wants to go. So we need to go back, check the policy. I don't know, like, again, I don't know where we're going to find 15,000. It's not a lot. I get that, but all of you have traffic requests, and you're not going to hear a different tone from me in terms of going to other capital accounts to find this stuff. And you've heard Wendy, capital accounts are intended to do what they're intended to do. So again, it's not about not agreeing with the councillor in principle. It's about the funding source and trying to satisfy all the requests that everybody has. So I'm in your hands. If you want to table it, and we'll come back when we can.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So there was a quick question. Sorry, I didn't put my hand up.
No way.
Can't he use that money from CIL, sorry?
No.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. This all is discussion that can probably be had offline. We all have things that we need to find funding for. We don't have to bring them all to committee. I think that this is something that the councillor can work with staff offline to try and figure out. Obviously, we're not going to get where we need to go on this today.
I second that motion, Councillor Lula.
So we have a motion in front of us, Mr. Chair, from Councillor Leeper on tabling. Is that what we're voting on?
Yep. So, do we allow the tabling of this motion? I was hoping you would defer. So on this one, I guess we're going to call for yeas and nays.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm unclear. If you want to move a deferral, to me they both function the same way. One which is a set date to come back, one which is a period to come back.
Fair enough. Okay. In that case, we'll table a report. And we're going to defer to the February meeting.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if you heard the clerk. She preferred to table it so we don't pressure the staff, right? So we come back by next meeting. So we table and give her more time, and I think that's what we should do. No,
Caitlin.
Mr. Chair, I had in my head, we were in our usual meeting cycle we would be meeting again within a month. The next Transportation Committee meeting is February the 3rd. So if that is sufficient time, I think if a motion is to table to the next defer to the next meeting, it would be back before you and there would be an option to do approve, amend, or further table or defer it at that time.
Yeah, forgive me. That's why I was saying February. Apologies, committee. So are you good with that, Matt?
I'm absolutely fine with both deferral or tabling. I am in committee's hands relating to that approach.
I'm looking for a deferral. Maybe on this one, we'll just, I'm looking to the committee.
I'll put a motion to defer for him.
Thank you. So on deferral. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thanks.
Withdraw the table.
Okay. So on deferral, is that item carried?
Carried.
Hooray. Okay. You also had an inquiry, Councillor Fleury.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. TCU Developments is currently undertaking development on 4 sites in the community of Robinson Village in Rideau Valley. The undertaking of these 4 projects on a short residential street at the same time has caused significant concern from my residents with regards to noise, debris, traffic, and parking issues. The issue is even more magnified by the fact that many residents are now working from home. Since the beginning of the application process, through community consultation, meetings, phone calls, requests, back and forth with representatives from my office, has had a number of constructability issues stemming from a traffic management plan, concerns about snow removal mentioned during the site plan, parking mentioned during the site plan, space for construction mentioned during the site plan, and impact on very small community of Robinson Village. I'd like to highlight overall some of the measures that have been placed, no community impact consideration, High-level constructability plan is missing. All construction related at the same time. If this had been phased impacts of trailers, for example, and right-of-way concerns and parking concerns would have been addressed. What my office and staff had to mitigate a parking permit plan unprecedented to allow for traffic management, which included removal of 24 plus parking spaces on street. This was organized through my office, Service Ottawa staff, traffic management staff, and residents. Helped negotiate a deal with the University of Ottawa for their own contractor to park in a nearby lot. Multiple complaints, emails, phone calls from residents about parking, blocked driveways, dirt, mess, concerns about visibility, paratransport stop removed, idling, and noise. Ensuring the developers sent out proper notification for demo for parking impacts to residents in paper and email. Requests to have small trailers being placed in the roadway without proper permits. Mitigating the trailer issues, where to put them, how many, the concerns of blocking driveways and parking. Changing parking hours, dealing with constant concerns from residents about parking for guests, their own homes. Overall, the issue of an overbuilt, all the development sites are too big for the properties, and this was not considered when it came to construction. Many cities across Canada are working on ways to improve constructability coordination. How can the City of Ottawa learn from the challenging developments, such as TCU's developments in Robinson Village sites, to lessen the impact of construction on existing residents and to transfer further responsibility for overall project coordination onto the developer?
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. So that inquiry is in. I see no further questions, no in-camera items. Councillor Lulaf.
Mr. Chair, I do have an inquiry, and I will send this off to staff right away. But I wanted to get in before the end of the meeting, so my apologies for walking on with an inquiry. To staff, I would like a list of service requests by ward and type regarding winter operations for 2017-2018, 2018-2019, and 2019-2020. And I'll send this wording off to the clerk right away.
Good. Great. Thank you, Councillor Lulaf. Seeing no further inquiries, I'm looking around. Other business? Adjournment. Our next meeting, as mentioned, will take place February 3rd, 2021. And media availability will take place starting in 15 minutes. Thank you.